or eastern and southern England, where there's a lot of low cloud, some mist and murk and some drizzle. Likewise for central and eastern Wales, but West Wales will see much brighter skies. Northern England turning brighter through the morning. Scotland and Northern Ireland, meanwhile, apart from 1 or 2 showers in the east, we'll see plenty of sunny skies. And we keep the sunshine across western Scotland and Northern Ireland throughout Wednesday. That's the place to be for widespread blue skies. And actually, it's looking brighter for Northern England and North Wales. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover. And we've got these showers continuing to roll into East Anglia, the East Midlands and the southeast through the day. So that's going to make it feel a little less pleasant, and a brisk wind from the east as well will hold temperatures back in the mid-teens. But elsewhere, feeling warm enough in any sunny spells. Then going into the evening, the clear skies in the north will progress southwards, and so a chilly start for many of us on Thursday, but actually plenty of fine weather through the day, sunny spells and feeling pleasant. But into the weekend, more rain to come.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, in the past 30 minutes, Tory leadership finalist Robert Jenrick dramatically told GB News' political editor Chris Hope, reform is a symptom, not a cause. I want to retire Nigel Farage. But is that thing possible? Nigel's hardly in pipe and slippers mode. Was it a wise thing to say? We'll have all the latest from the Tory party conference live from Birmingham. And over the past 2 days at the Tory party conference, GB News' political editor has grilled the final four Tory leadership hopefuls. James Cleverly is about to take the stage, so we'll find out soon who fared best. We'll get Chopper's verdict as next. The two finalists will exclusively battle it out on GB News on October the 17th. And we've long suspected it, and now government data has proved that soaring immigration is making us all worse off. Plus, despite pledging to end asylum hotels today, Labour admitted they will rely on them at a cost of £8 million every single week for another 3 years. Will our politicians ever take back control of our borders? And a new survey by Fair Fuel UK, exclusively revealed today to GB News, shows that 85% of drivers fear the Labour Party will raise fuel duty in October. and 60% of all voters think that the Labour Party's performance has been disastrous since they came to power. We're joined in the studio by Howard Cox. That's all coming on your next show. Well, that put the cat amongst the pigeons. Robert Jenrick, about half an hour ago, said he wants to retire Nigel Farage. Reform is a symptom and not a cause. Pretty disparaging stuff, got to say. The atmosphere in the room was sucked out when he said it. There were audible gasps in Birmingham when Mr Jenrick said that. Was that the right thing to do by going to war with Nigel Farage? Or, as Jacob Rees-Mogg said yesterday and again today, actually, it's a more sensible route to power to get the Labour Party out, to team up with Reform rather than going to loggerheads. Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. That's the way to get in touch. But now it's your headlines. Here's Cameron Walker.
Good afternoon. The top stories at 3:02. We begin with some breaking news, and the White House says that Iran is preparing to imminently launch a ballistic missile attack against Israel. It comes as tensions in the Middle East reach boiling points following the Israeli ground operation in southern Lebanon. The Israeli army says it's begun a targeted ground operation against the Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah, the first time since 2006 that Israeli boots have been on the ground there. The Lebanese PM says that has described this as one of the most dangerous moments in their history. The UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy has repeated his call for Britons to leave Lebanon while they still can, warning the situation is volatile. A commercial flight to help British nationals escape Lebanon has been chartered by the UK government, who continues its calls for a ceasefire.
Opposition remains the same. Having spoken to our American colleagues and other allies, we're calling for an immediate ceasefire. We need a diplomatic solution to the problems in Lebanon so that Israelis can go back to their home in northern Israel and Lebanese can return to their homes in southern Israel. So at this time, we want to see a political solution, the Amos Hochstein plan, which is on the table from the Americans, and an immediate ceasefire.
In other news, the Conservative leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick has defended his comments on the UK Special Forces, where he claims they are killing rather than capturing terrorists. He also gave his views on Nigel Farage's Reform UK political party, suggesting its popularity is down to Tory failure.
My view of Reform is this. I think it's a symptom, not a cause. It exists in its current state because we failed. And by that I don't mean you, the members of the party. I mean, we in Westminster. We made promises, we didn't keep them. So I'm not going to disparage Reform. I think in a way that's denigrating the millions of people who vote for them, who are our people. What I am going to do is set out, with your support, to make them redundant, to retire Nigel Farage.
A 14-year-old girl has been left with potentially life-changing injuries after a suspected acid attack outside a school in West London. A boy aged 16 and a 27-year-old woman were also injured after the substance believed to be acid was thrown at the victims outside Westminster Academy on Monday afternoon. Police believe the teenagers were approached by a lone suspect who was on an e-scooter with a member of staff left injured after she rushed to help. Police are appealing for witnesses. Now, 4 men have been sentenced for their part in the violence disorder and arson that took place in Hare Hills in Leeds in July of this year. The men were given a combined prison term of over 20 years. Well, our GB News reporter Anna Riley is outside Leeds Crown Court for us. Anna, please bring us up to date.
Yes, Cameron. Well, Martin Daubney, a 37-year-old man, was given 6 years for his part in the violent disorder that broke out in Hare Hills on July the 18th. He was part of setting fire to a first bus vehicle that had to be evacuated during the disorder that broke out on the afternoon. And that disorder broke out as a result of social services removing 4 children from a Romanian family from that area. He was given 6 years. Mark Mitchell, a 34-year-old man, he was jailed. Milam Zamonsky, age 30, and Silan Valentin Paliaga, and they were given a combined prison term of 20 years. The four appeared via video link from HMP Leeds. 2 of them were supported by Romanian interpreters. 1 was supported by a Czech interpreter. £500,000 worth of damage, the court heard, was caused to the damaged bus, and £300,000 worth of damage was caused to police who had missiles thrown at them, who had a police car overturned, and police car had many missiles thrown at them throughout the disorder, which went on from about 5 o'clock in the afternoon to the early hours of the morning, with around 1,000 people out on the street at the height of the disorder.
GB News reporter Anna Riley outside Leeds Crown Court. Thank you. Now, changes to the price cap on consumer energy bills take effect this month following the announcements by the regulator Ofgem. Bill payers have been urged to give an accurate meter reading as gas and electricity price rises take effect. A household in England, Wales and Scotland using a typical amount of gas and electricity will now see their annual bill rise by about £149 to £1,717. Experts have encouraged people to submit a meter reading as the change comes in so they can avoid being charged on estimated usage at the higher rates. And new rules have come into force, banning businesses from withholding tips or service charges from their staff. Firms including restaurants, pubs, hairdressers and taxi operators are set to be impacted by the new law, requiring 100% of tips to be shared between employees from today. However, hospitality industry bosses say the move could hit under-pressure businesses with an additional cost. And we have some breaking news from Buckingham Palace. Her Royal Highness Princess Beatrice and her husband, Edoardo Mapelli-Mozzi, are very pleased to announce that they are expecting their second baby together, and it is due in the early spring. His Majesty the King, he has been informed, and both families are delighted with the news. Well, that's it from me. Now back to Martin in Westminster.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron. Now got some breaking news for you. As the situation in the Middle East continues to escalate, the United States have received indications that Iran is preparing to launch a ballistic missile attack imminently on Israel. Now, for the latest update, I'm joined by GB News' Homeland Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, a significant ramping up of the situation in the Middle East brings us up to date.
Yes, there's no doubt. This is various news outlets in the United States now quoting senior officials at both the White House and the US Department of Defense, saying that Iran, according to their intelligence, is preparing to launch an imminent ballistic missile attack on Israel. We've been fearing such an attack for months, actually. You remember back in April of this year, there was a very significant attack, an unprecedented attack, actually, launched by Iran in response to the killing of 2 Iranian generals in the Syrian capital, Damascus, when it's believed the Israeli military, they never confirm nor deny these operations, struck a compound within the Iranian embassy in Damascus, killing those 2 generals. Then we saw a huge response from Iran after a number of weeks, 320 munitions that were launched towards Israel. They included 170 drones, 30 cruise missiles and 120 ballistic missiles. Now, this time round, we don't know just what Iran is planning to do, but we had been expecting another retaliatory strike from Iran before any of this erupted in Lebanon with the war that Israel is now taking to the terrorist group Hezbollah. Because again, you'll remember that in July of this year, the Hamas terrorist political leader Ismail Haniyeh was taken out in Tehran, in an explosion there in central Tehran. He was a guest of the Iranian government at that time, and Iran vowed revenge, but nothing has happened since July. It's believed that those in power in Iran were giving the potential for peace talks between Israel and Hamas in Gaza to come to fruition before deciding to take action or not. But of course, since then, we have what is now unfolding in Lebanon, a direct attack by Israel, of course, on this terrorist group, Hezbollah, which is very firmly aligned to the Iranian government, supported, funded, trained by the Iranian government. It is the Iranian government's proxy in that region, its main proxy, a big fighting force in Hezbollah, but that is coming under, that terrorist group coming under direct attack by Israel. Israel, of course, launching the offensive against Hezbollah because they've said enough is enough. After 8,000 missiles, drones and rockets have been fired by Hezbollah from southern Lebanon into northern Israel for almost a year now, since the attacks in October of last year that killed 1,200 people in Israel and resulted in 200 hostages being taken. So a very significant development. Now we await what's going to happen when the US talk about an imminent strike using ballistic missiles, Martin. That may be just a matter of hours away.
And Washington has already said there will be severe consequences if the Iranians were to perform any such attack on Israel. Mark White, thank you for that update. And, of course, we'll come back to you if this story develops during the show. Thank you, Mark. Now, it's the second day of the Tory party conference, and the race to succeed Rishi Sunak as party leader is heating up. In the past 30 minutes, Tory leadership finalist Robert Jenrick spoke to GB News' political editor Chris Hope, and here's what he had to say.
My view of reform is this. I think it's a symptom, not a cause. It exists in its current state because we failed. And by that I don't mean you, the members of the party. I mean we in Westminster. We made promises, we didn't keep them. So I'm not going to disparage reform. I think in a way that's denigrating the millions of people who vote for them, who are our people. What I am going to do is set out, with your support, to make them redundant, to retire Nigel Farage.
And we'll hear from the final of those four candidates, James Cleverly, soon. But first, let's go to GB News' presenter Tom Harwood, live from the Tory party conference in Birmingham. Tom, an astonishing outburst there from Mr Jenrick. I want to retire Nigel Farage. Well, last time I checked, Tom, Nigel isn't in pipe and slippers mode. So this looks like they're going to be at loggerheads. Tell us more.
Well, it's interesting listening to Robert Jenrick earlier. He was saying that he wants to sort of emulate the policy position of reform, that reform aren't the cause of discontent, they're a symptom of that discontent. And the Conservative Party can step into the role that they took on, can win back those 4 million votes for the Conservative Party that went to reform. Of course, they're an opposing political party. It'd be very strange, I think, if any leadership contender said that they didn't want to retire Nigel Farage, win back the seat of Clacton. Although I have to say, looking at various polls, looking at the reports on the ground in Clacton, I think it's very unlikely that Nigel Farage will be dislodged anytime soon. I think of all the 5 Reform members of Parliament, he is the safest of all of them in his Clacton constituency. But I'm delighted to be joined on the set here by another MP. James Wild is the Member of Parliament for North West. That's correct, yeah. North West. James, you're backing Tom Tugendhat. He's in last place at the moment on the MP ballots. Why are you backing someone in last place?
I think Tom's got the character and the values that we need to rebuild the trust with the British people, with those people who switched to reform. He's got momentum coming into the conference. He added votes in the last stage of the MP votes. We've seen at this conference the reception he had from members when he did his presentation and question and answer session yesterday, setting out a positive vision for Conservatism that will help us win back the voters that we need to, so we can kick out this awful Labour government.
It's interesting to hear Tom's position on policy. He started off this race being pretty strident on the issue of the European Court of Human Rights. He's, to some extent, rode back from that initial position, or is that an unfair characterisation?
I think that is a bit unfair. I've worked with Tom on this issue for over a decade when we both worked in the Ministry of Defence and after he left, and his position is very clear. Opt out of those parts that don't work for us, which is perfectly doable under the existing framework. Reform the bits that aren't working for us, and other countries are experiencing similar problems. But if we can't get the reforms, be prepared to walk away from that treaty. We don't want to get that to that point first off. We want to reform the treaty, but he's been very clear he's prepared to do so if necessary.
Robert Jenrick today has been speaking about those who want to reform the ECHR as if they're the sort of people who as if it's David Cameron's EU negotiation strategy, the sort of failed attempt at renegotiating something, about reforming something that has a membership of 46 countries that would need unanimity to agree to any change. Is it really possible to reform it?
Well, it's not easy to reform these international treaties, but we're seeing other countries, Germany, where they're looking at issues with deporting terrorists. We all want the same objective. It's how do we get there? Do we try and reform it first? Obviously, the ECHR is written into the Good Friday Agreement. There are complications that we need to work through before you got to that point. I think simply saying you would just leave on day one isn't really going to be a sensible policy to pursue.
Now, Nigel Farage is a figure who looms large over this conference. There were 98 seats where the Reform Party came second. Many of your former colleagues would still be on those green benches, arguably, if the votes that went to Reform had gone to the Conservatives instead. What's the Tom Tugendhat strategy for winning those voters back?
We've got to win back the trust of those people. They voted against us in many ways. They wanted to get rid of the Conservatives because we'd failed to deliver on what we said we'd do, bringing down legal migration, dealing with illegal migration. So by acting on the issues they are concerned about, he's proposing putting in place a legal cap, for example, on migration of 100,000 people a year and training more British people into those jobs to move into the NHS. It's by delivering on what we say we'll do, and that's what Tom's record is. He voted against national insurance rises, he voted against vaccine passports. He sticks to his principles and he acts when he says he will, and that's what people want to see from politicians. And we've moved away from that, and that's why we lost lots of good colleagues. And we need Tom in position so we can win back those seats and win the next election.
It does seem that one of the other candidates in this race, Kemi Badenoch, has been talking about a cap today, although that seems to be a shift in policy perhaps from an earlier position. Do you think that all the candidates are now converging on this idea of a 100,000 cap? Is this a point of unanimity now?
Well, potentially. I mean, Tom came out with this early. He recognises that immigration was one of the issues that people voted against us for. Similarly, on the NHS, people didn't think that we were dealing with the backlog in waiting lists and we'd failed to deliver the reform that's necessary into that service. So on both of those issues, people switched away from us. And I hope there is consensus. We do need to bring immigration down considerably, and we need to invest in training into British people to move into the jobs in the public sector and the private sector.
OK, James Wilde, thank you so much for joining us here live on the GBNews stand at Conservative Party conference. Back to you, Martin.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom Harwood. Excellent stuff. That's James Wilde, their MP, supporting Tom Tugendhat. And let's cross back now to the Tory Party conference, where our very own political editor, Christopher Hope, is speaking to the leadership hopeful James Cleverly.
I look across our party. I look in this auditorium. We have people whose families come from all different parts of the world. I'm the child of migrant families. Oh, actually, on both sides of my family. My mum came here from Sierra Leone in West Africa in 1966. My dad's family came here from northern France in 1066. So I've got... So I've got migrant stock on both sides of my family tree. And my African family are just as passionate about the integrity of our borders and the integration of people to come and live here just as much as my English family, and both are right. We're a good country, but we do have rules. Play by the rules, that's great. Break the rules, you should expect consequences.
Moving on to tax, are you happy with record tax levels under your government?
No, look, of course not. Of course not. And this is one of the things that cost us dearly at the general election. We said we would cut taxes and we weren't able to. We didn't cut taxes. Now, COVID distorted everything. But there were opportunities where we could have and should have cut taxes, and we missed those opportunities. So let's not make that mistake again. I am absolutely determined to get us back to being, not just talking about, but being a low-tax Conservative government.
Okay. On your...
Yeah, you can definitely applaud low taxes. You can definitely applaud low taxes.
On your character, you made an inappropriate joke, didn't you?
Yeah.
Last Christmas time, talking about Rohypnol, and it's not really illegal, only a little bit. Why do you say that to people you barely knew, and what does Mrs. Cleverly think about the comment?
Oh, you don't want to hear what Mrs. Cleverly said to me after... if you think that got me in trouble, repeating the words she said to me would get me in an awful lot of trouble, particularly in a live broadcast. Look, I messed up. I messed up. I was trying to make a point that I was the Home Secretary who was updating the law to make spiking illegal, to protect women. I was trying to make that point in front of a number of journalists
who you barely knew about rape. I mean, it's not appropriate.
No, but look, it was the point I was making. I was trying to amplify the point that I was taking action on a really serious issue. I tried to do it in a light-hearted way. It was wrong. It was crass. I apologised at the time, and my real frustration is that in doing that, it undermined the really serious work I was doing. That was totally my fault. But you take it on the chin, you accept the criticism, you recognise that you've done something wrong, and you make good and you make amends. That is what I've done. And as I say, I'm an open book. You know what you're getting with me. But I would make the point that I was the Home Secretary who actually took action, and I have done throughout my political career, to keep women safe.
So looking forward, how do you beat Labour? Do you go after the Lib Dem vote or the Reform vote?
So we've got to recognise that we lost votes to Reform and the Lib Dems, and a whole load of Conservatives stayed at home. And if we want to win, we have to win back voters from Reform and the Lib Dems and those that stay at home. I think about half a dozen people across the country went directly to Labour, but not very many. So we need to demonstrate that we are a proper Conservative party, because Reform is a pale imitation of us. We don't need to be a pale imitation of them. We need to be the best version of us.
Nigel Farage, is he a Tory? Will you allow him in if he stops?
He's not a Tory. He's not a Tory. He never claims to be a Tory. He said he hates the Tories. He wants to destroy our party. He is not one of us. This is my family. This is my clan. These are the people I serve. We need to win back Conservatives, true Conservatives, who've been tempted across to support Reform. I don't blame them. I'm not going to tell them off. We dropped the ball. It is our fault, but it is in our gift to get them back. But we don't do that by making deals with people who say they want to destroy our party.
You used to be Deputy Mayor of London. What job would you give Boris Johnson in your new team?
Well, I don't know what job he might want. Look, he's a great Conservative. He's a good friend, a fantastic communicator. He was Mayor of London. He won in London, and we need to get back in the habit of doing that for a start.
That was James Cleverly there speaking with our political editor, Chris Hope. Reform is a pale imitation of us. We don't need to be a pale imitation of them, he said. And he said of Nigel Farage, he is not one of us. He wants to destroy us. And we do not want to do a deal with any party that wants to destroy us. Nigel Farage seems to be looming large over this conference, even though he's not there. Now, we'll bring you all the very latest reaction as all four Tory leadership candidates have now addressed their party faithfuls on GB News. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Earlier this week, Olympic swimmer Adam Peaty finally proposed to his girlfriend, because I've been waiting for this, the daughter of Gordon Ramsay, with a gorgeous yellow diamond ring.
Yeah, so the demand for coloured diamonds in the last 10 years has soared by, guess how much, 77% between 2010 and 2019. Joining us now to tell us more about some of the hottest trends in the diamond world is dealer to the stars, Neil Dutson. Good morning, Neil. Morning, Ben. And I've got one of your exemplary examples. Look at this bad boy.
So
What's huge?
That's a very rare Muso Colombian emerald. And it's alpine green translucent, so it's a really stunning
See if
colour.
we get a close-up.
So, yeah, so pretty impressive.
Can I be very crude and ask how much this is worth?
So value is £200,000.
How much, sorry?
£200,000. Now, the reason is its rarity. It's minor oiling. It's very, very, very pretty. The two diamonds on the side are D-colour, flawless diamonds, just to accentuate the setting.
Neil, how did you get into diamonds?
I studied diamonds in Antwerp. So Antwerp used to be the diamond capital of the world, really.
Yeah.
85% of the world's diamonds go through Antwerp, or used to. And now Dubai has taken over. And yeah, I just went to a school there. I learnt about diamonds, and I just didn't want to be seen off in the future.
Neil, I'm very concerned I'm going to drop 200 grand's worth of diamonds into my cup of tea, so can I give that back to you?
Absolutely.
But I can hold one if you like.
Oh, well, I've got
Neil.
a lovely one here.
Thank you.
So this is a fancy vivid yellow. It's 8 carats.
This is my dream ring, just so you know, for this hand. This would be
Is it big
amazing.
enough?
So what would I call this? A yellow?
So that's a natural fancy vivid yellow diamond. Value £300,000. So,
it fits
depends
like
where
a
you're
glove.
buying it from.
It fits like a glove, Neil.
Oh.
Maybe it's a sign. It's meant to be mine.
Definitely a sign, yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:29. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the Tory leadership hopefuls, James Cleverly and Robert Jenrick, have distanced themselves from Nigel Farage and Reform UK in this past half an hour. But might any Tory leadership contender present much of a threat to the Labour Party? Well, let's discuss this now with the former Labour advisor, Kevin Meagher. Kevin, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. Let's start with the fact that Nigel Farage isn't at the Tory party conference, but he seems to be dominating quite a lot of the conversation. What's your take about that?
He will do, absolutely. I suspect there's lots of Conservative activists that probably feel that they've got more in common with Nigel Farage than they have with any of the four contenders to be leader of the Conservative Party. And that's the problem, in a sense, that there's a lot of competition on the political right. And Nigel Farage, whether people like him or they don't like him, he's the most charismatic politician in British politics. He's absolutely everywhere. Everybody knows who he is. Everyone has a view about him. A lot of people like him. A lot of people don't like him. But he doesn't need to get everybody to like him to cause the Conservative Party an existential crisis, which is what he did in the general election. I think Labour people are still absolutely just utterly bewildered that Rishi Sunak would embark on a general election campaign with the bow doors wide open. It was obvious what was going to happen. The Tory party capsized because Reform took an awful lot of votes from them. And it's very difficult at this stage to kind of unwind all of that, to sort of say, look, can we do some sort of pact or some sort of deal? Because Nigel Farage is incredibly critical of the Conservative Party for not making good on a lot of its promises when it's had the opportunity to do so in office, and simply doesn't trust them to do it in the future. So it's very, very difficult for any of these Tory contenders to cut a deal with reform and to try and get reform to kind of back off or go into some sort of abeyance. Reform is in this, I think, for the long haul, and will compete very, very vigorously at the next general election. And that's a major fundamental problem for the Conservative Party, which has had a domination of the political centre-right in Britain for 200 years.
And Kevin, it could also be a major problem for the Labour Party. 98 seats where reform came second to the Labour Party in the Red Wall, areas of immigration, things like that will be a huge deciding factor. So can I ask you, referring back to the Tory party prospective leaders, which one do you think will be the biggest threat to the Labour Party? I mean, should they tack to the right? Should they attempt to become a kind of reform party with a different coloured rosette? Is that the biggest threat to the Labour Party?
I think they've got enemies everywhere. They've got to try and win back kind of soft Liberals and try and win back geographically the southwest of England, where the Liberal Democrats booted lots of Tories out. They've got to push down that reform vote and get some of those people to come back and support the Conservative Party. And they've obviously got to fight Labour as well. It's very difficult to be able to do all of those three things. I think what we'll see from the candidates initially is a move right to try and engage with reform voters and pull some of those people across on the basis that the Conservative Party is a party of government. And we've heard the protest, but don't rest as a protest vote. Come back to the Conservatives as a potential party of government. How successful that will be is moot at the moment. But you're right. I mean, reform is an issue for the Labour Party as well. And 98 seats where they're in second place. We look at the Red Wall. It went blue in 2019. It went mostly red again in 2024. But there's still a lot of seats there where it is very, very competitive. There's a lot of traditional Labour voters who've sort of said, look, I want to get rid of the Tories for multifarious reasons. But this is not the Labour vote of old. It is now contested in a way that perhaps it hasn't been in the past. So reform will be putting a lot of energy into some of these Labour battles. I mean, we've got, for example, there's a mayoral contest that takes place in Doncaster next May, which again, reform, I suspect, will push very hard there. So there's lots of battlegrounds before the next general election. We'll get a sense of whether reform can keep building and keep riding that wave or not. But it's a major headache for the Conservative Party, whoever takes over from Rishi Sunak. I mean, as an outsider looking across the aisle, we've just seen some footage there of James Cleverly with Chris Hope, and I thought he did really, really well. He comes across as, I think, more human and more rounded than the other candidates, and I think that's a massive strength for him. Labour people will be hoping Kemi Badenoch wins, though.
I see. Kevin, always an absolute pleasure to have your company. Thank you very much, Kevin Meagher. Always a delight. Thank you. Now, lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including the latest in the manhunt for the acid attacker that left a schoolgirl with potentially life-threatening injuries in London yesterday. But first, here's your headlines with Cameron Walker.
Martin, thank you. It's 3:34. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. Well, we begin with breaking news in the last hour that the White House says Iran is preparing to imminently launch a ballistic missile attack against Israel. It comes as tensions in the Middle East reach boiling point following the Israeli ground operation in southern Lebanon. The Israeli army says it's begun a targeted ground operation against the Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah, the first time since 2006 that Israeli boots have been on the ground there. The Lebanese PM has described this as one of the most dangerous moments in their history. The UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy has repeated his call for Britons to leave the country while they still can, warning the situation is volatile. A commercial flight to help British nationals escape Lebanon has been chartered by the UK government, who continues its calls for a ceasefire. Conservative leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick has defended his comments on the UK Special Forces, where he claimed they are killing rather than capturing terrorists. He also gave his views on Nigel Farage's Reform UK political party, suggesting its popularity is down to Tory failure.
My view of reform is this. I think it's a symptom, not a cause. It exists in its current state because we failed. And by that I don't mean you, the members of the party. I mean we in Westminster. We made promises, we didn't keep them. So I'm not going to disparage reform. I think in a way that's denigrating the millions of people who vote for them, who are our people. What I am going to do is set out, with your support, to make them redundant, to retire Nigel Farage.
In other news, a 14-year-old girl has been left with potentially life-changing injuries after a suspected acid attack outside a school in West London. A boy aged 16 and a 27-year-old woman were also injured after the substance, believed to be acidic, was thrown at the victims outside Westminster Academy yesterday afternoon. Police believe the teenagers were approached by a lone suspect who was on an e-scooter, with a member of staff left injured after she rushed to help. Police are appealing for witnesses. 4 men have been sentenced for their part in the violence disorder and arson that took place in Hare Hills in July earlier this year. Justin Dobre, Mark Mitchell, Milan Zamonstny and Selan Valentin Pelagia were given a combined prison term of over 20 years. The 4 appeared via video link from HMP Leeds and were sentenced at Leeds Crown Court this afternoon, with 2 of the men assisted by a Romanian interpreter and 1 man assisted by a Czech interpreter. And finally, Buckingham Palace has announced Her Royal Highness Princess Beatrice and her husband, Edoardo Mapelli-Mozzi, are expecting their 2nd child together. Due in the early spring, the new arrival will be a sibling for the couple's daughter, Sienna, and the princess's stepson, Wolfie. The king has been informed, and both families are delighted with the news. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's becoming drier from the west, but it's taking a time with still a lot of cloud across the UK and some showery rain. That rain, well, it's causing some issues across the east of England, and it will continue into the evening as the area of low pressure that's been with us for some days slowly pulls away. So some wet weather to come for East Anglia and the southeast overnight. Otherwise, the rain in the east tends to turn lighter and more showery as the night progresses, but we keep a lot of cloud for much of England and Wales. The clearest skies overnight will be for Scotland and Northern Ireland. 1 or 2 showers. Otherwise, under those clear skies, temperatures falling into the mid or even low single figures in some sheltered spots. But that's where we've got the brightest weather to start off Wednesday. Northern Ireland and Scotland, plenty of blue skies. Quite a difference from much of central, eastern and southern England, where there's a lot of low cloud, some mist and murk and some drizzle. Likewise for central and eastern Wales, but West Wales we'll see much brighter skies. Northern England turning brighter through the morning. Scotland and Northern Ireland, meanwhile, apart from 1 or 2 showers in the east, we'll see plenty of sunny skies. And we keep the sunshine across western Scotland and Northern Ireland throughout Wednesday. That's the place to be for widespread blue skies. And actually, it's looking brighter for Northern England and North Wales. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover. And we've got these showers continuing to roll into East Anglia, the East Midlands, and the southeast through the day. So that's going to make it feel a little less pleasant, and a brisk wind from the east as well will hold temperatures back in the mid-teens. But elsewhere, feeling warm enough in any sunny spells. Then going into the evening, the clear skies in the north will progress southwards, and so a chilly start for many of us on Thursday, but actually plenty of fine weather through the day, sunny spells and feeling pleasant. But into the weekend, more rain to come.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Some queues in County Durham this afternoon. The northbound A1M, now as you head up towards Bradbury Junction 60, is partially blocked. It's at the scene of a collision. Of course, there's emergency repairs 60 up to 61 at Boburn, so pretty slow going northbound on that stretch. Queues northbound M6 Lim at 20 up to Woolston 21. Now 2 lanes are combed off for emergency barrier repairs. Follows an earlier accident. The queues back past 19 for Knutsford. Oxfordshire, some congestion. The northbound M40, the from Tame 8A up to Bicester at 9. A collision there means a lane closure in place and it's slow going. A lane shut southbound down the M1, Daventry 16 down towards Northampton services at 15A. A vehicle having a tyre change, a lane shut, and it's looking slow.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 3:41. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. The Metropolitan Police have launched a manhunt after a suspected acid attack took place at the Westminster Academy School in central London yesterday. The force described the suspect as a tall and slim black man wearing dark clothing and riding an e-scooter. 2 pupils and 1 teacher are thought to be among the victims, with the injuries of a 14-year-old girl described as possibly life-changing. A terrible story, and joining me now to discuss it is GB News' reporter Adam Cherry. Adam, a horrific attack in London in broad daylight outside of school. Tell us more.
Yeah, so the attack happened yesterday at around 4:40 in the afternoon. Police called around that time alongside paramedics. As you say, 2 pupils, a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, were injured by this attacker. A 27-year-old member of staff was subsequently injured in a non-life-threatening way as she attended to them before the paramedics arrived. She has now been discharged from hospital, but both pupils remain in hospital at this time. They have released a description of the suspect. That's right, he's described as a tall, slim black male wearing dark clothing and perhaps wearing either a balaclava or mask to obscure his face. He rode an e-bike directly behind me on this road here, was working alone and attacked the 2 pupils over my right shoulder. Police are appealing for any eyewitnesses or any information which can be reported anonymously. They say they're particularly interested in dash cam footage, which might be particularly helpful in these circumstances.
Adam Cherry, thank you for that update and the description of the attacker, one that's all too common in London nowadays. And I guess now, Adam Cherry, there'll be a case of piecing together the evidence. There'll be CCTV footage for sure. Every school now has its own CCTV system. It's a sign of the times for child protection, child safety. And as you say, dash cams, doorbell cameras, perhaps anything to try and piece together where the assailant escaped to, Adam Cherry. That's the next stage of this operation.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's a very busy area, and it was just after the school gates opened at the end of the day for pupils to leave, so there would have been a lot of parents, a lot of cars here, and you would hope that a lot of eyewitnesses will be able to piece things together relatively quickly. It's suspected to be an acidic substance. It hasn't been confirmed yet, but that is our working understanding according to the Metropolitan Police, and they'll of course continue their investigations and analysis.
Thank you, Adam Cherry. Just to repeat that, the acid attack at the Westminster Academy in West London yesterday, 4:40. Police have issued a description of a slim, tall, black man in dark clothing, wearing a mask or a balaclava on an e-scooter. I'm afraid that's a description that's all too commonplace, as anybody will know who lives in London or indeed any major city now. But nevertheless, the police are still searching for that man who's left 1 pupil with life-changing injuries. A terrible, terrible story. Now it's the end of an era as Britain's last coal-fired power station at Ratcliffe-on-Soar shuts down. For 47 years, my dad, Bob, dug coal that powered that power station. We'll be live outside that station next for a moment in history. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
GB News presenter Mr. Patrick Christie's is going to live off £15 per week as part of his Friends of the Elderly fundraiser.
Yeah, so far Patrick's raised over £193,000 with the help of all of you at home and all of your generous donations. So thank you so much for all of that. And thank you, Patrick, for coming up with this and flying the flag, I suppose, for these people who feel as if they're being victimised at the moment. Very, very worried about the winter fuel payment. Just tell us how you set upon this £15 figure.
Yeah, absolutely. So the £15 food figure was based around a conversation I had with a pensioner called Sue in Cheshire, who told me, and our viewers, quite a horrendous story, actually, about what she has to live off every week. £15 is her food budget. Her boiler's gone. She can't afford to replace that. She's worried about whether or not she can afford to even put an electric blanket on. She is essentially too proud to actually officially ask for help. We had to really convince her to come on and tell her story so that she thought, you know, she would do it so that she could help others, really. That's why she did it. So I thought, well, you know, it's not absolutely freezing yet. There's things I'm going to do as it gets colder and as winter proper kicks on. So I'll do a few bits and bobs there that might be more physically demanding to raise a bit of money. But this is something I can do in the meantime. So I thought, well, I'd live off £15 a week. £13.55 to be precise. Left myself some wiggle room in case I want a can of Diet Coke or something over the course of the week. But this is the food shop that I did yesterday. I've got some lentils, a bit of couscous, a couple of tins of tuna, some tomatoes, some peppers, bit of pasta, some eggs, and a stir-fry thing that I think I'm actually going to have to eat today, because if viewers have got the impression that I'm a man who doesn't necessarily plan things through properly, they are correct, because I got this and it goes out of date tomorrow. So there you go.
The People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:47. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. It's the end of an era today as Britain's final coal-fired power station at Ratcliffe-on-Soar has sadly closed. It puts an end to the country's use of coal for electricity, which began in 1882. Now, this story has a particularly emotional response from me because for 47 years, my dad dug coal at Cockgrave Pit, just down the road from Ratcliffe, that helped to power that station. Is net zero zealotry destroying our energy sovereignty and offering dole, not coal, to the British working classes? Well, let's now go to Ratcliffe-on-Soar and speak to GB News reporter Jack Carson, who is live from that historic seat with those magnificent stacks behind you there, Jack. Finally, their last puffs of steam will be coming out of them. It's a sad moment, I believe, for the East Midlands and the British working classes as a whole, as finally Old King Coal keels over.
Well, it was a moment yesterday when 170 of the staff who still work at this plant gathered in the canteen to watch the generators be turned off for the final time. It was officially desynced from the grid yesterday afternoon, and now we start this 2-year decommission process as the UK becomes the first country within the G7 to have no electricity generation from coal. In comparison to the other countries in the G7, France is going to phase out by 2027, Canada by 2030, the US by 2035. Germany is only phasing out what's called brown coal. That's the most polluting of the coals in 2038. The UK has been on a move away from coal since the early 1990s when it moved towards more gas, but it still was a huge part of the UK's electricity grid. Just over a decade ago, in 2012, it made up nearly 39–40% of the UK's power, but compare that to a decade on and how quickly the grid has decarbonised. In 2022, on average across the year, coal production of electricity accounted for just 1.7%. Now, there are, as I mentioned, more than 170 workers that still are at this plant. Unions have been around the table with Uniper, who own the site, in order over this decommissioning process to enable reskilling of those workers so they can find new jobs, as well as redundancy packages. And there are longer term aims within this site. What's known as a local development order has been put together with Uniper, the local council and other investors to come up with an idea of how this site can be used. That, Martin, the ideas so far have been things like a zero carbon technology technology and energy hub for the East Midlands. Ideas that there could be thousands of jobs created from that. But the closure of this plant and the end of coal and energy production was sped up a few years ago, just before the UK's turn to host COP 2026. And we know about the green aims with this government to have a net zero grid by 2030. Therefore, the closure of this power station was always going to be inevitable. Interesting, Flinton Sly, who's the chief executive of the National Energy System Operator, that looks after the UK's energy production, says that goal is incredibly challenging, but says it can be achievable. And talking about the closure of this plant, the Minister for Energy, Michael Shanks, says that this end of coal is the end of an era, but he says a new age of energy jobs in areas such as wind power and new technologies like carbon capture and storage. But the closure of this plant over the past 24 hours, those promises from this new government of cheaper energy bills, Martin, comes as the energy price cap once again goes up 10%. It's gone up now by Ofgem for the period of October to December. That's for an average household an extra £149 on their bills. And so people looking at the closure of this coal power station for the final time, ending, as you mentioned, a more than 140-year history of this country using coal to power energy. People are looking at their bills going up, possibly questioning whether that move is too soon. But as you mentioned, Martin, with your own personal connection as well, these infamous cooling towers that sit on the horizon behind me, the closure of this power station will leave a hole in this community.
Jack Carson, a lot of people will be thinking there's more hot air comes out of the politicians than ever came out of those chimneys behind you, and that's saying something. They've been going since 1967. But on a more serious point, anybody who knows that area knows that East Midlands Parkway, the railway station, is literally right next to those cooling stacks. What are they going to do? What, blow those stacks up, take them down? How will people get to East Midlands Airport? How will people use that's the main train line to London? Are they going to demolish those magnificent towers? Is that the next step, Jack?
Well, this is all part of, as I mentioned, this local development order. So Arup, working with Uniper and Rushcliffe Borough Council, have worked together to create this order that would, they say, make the most out of potential development opportunities. As part of that, as you mentioned, it's buildings, these iconic cooling towers, other structures would be decommissioned as they are set to be starting from today over the next 2 years and then eventually demolished. They say that would then make this land suitable for things like a green energy hub, for maybe logistical warehouses, for advanced manufacturing. They say that is the way to retain jobs in this area. But the iconicity of the site of these cooling towers and the jobs that are going to be lost here before any more jobs are going to be created certainly will hurt in the short term.
Jack Austin, thank you for braving the elements there. Radcliffe and Saw. A lot of people like me will think this is just another nail in the coffin of the British industrial landscape and the British working classes. They promised these jobs all along, thousands of jobs. Where are they? Where are the jobs? I remember when every village around there had a full employment. Every paper shop, every butcher's, every pub, everybody was employed, was proud, was happy. That's been taken away and it was never replaced. Rest in peace, old King Cole. Now, stick with us. We'll have the full reaction from the Conservative Party conference. The final day, they're all talking about Nigel Farage. It's not even there. We'll be live from Birmingham. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. That's your weather. Here's Aidan McGibbon.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's becoming drier from the west, but it's taking a time with still a lot of cloud across the UK and some showery rain. That rain, well, it's causing some issues across the east of England, and it will continue into the evening as the area of low pressure that's been with us for some days slowly pulls away. So some wet weather to come for East Anglia in the southeast overnight. Otherwise, the rain in the east tends to turn lighter and more showery as the night progresses, but we keep a lot of cloud for much of England and Wales. The clearest skies overnight will be for Scotland and Northern Ireland, 1 or 2 showers. Otherwise, under those clear skies, temperatures falling into the mid or even low single figures in some sheltered spots. But that's where we've got the brightest weather to start off Wednesday. Northern Ireland and Scotland, plenty of blue skies. Quite a difference from much of central, eastern and southern England, where there's a lot of low cloud, some mist and murk and some drizzle. Likewise for central and eastern Wales, but West Wales will see much brighter skies. Northern England turning brighter through the morning. Scotland and Northern Ireland, meanwhile, apart from 1 or 2 showers in the east, we'll see plenty of sunny skies. And we keep the sunshine across western Scotland and Northern Ireland throughout Wednesday. That's the place to be for widespread blue skies. And actually it's looking brighter for Northern England and North Wales. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover. And we've got these showers continuing to roll into East Anglia, the East Midlands and the southeast through the day. So that's going to make it feel a little less pleasant, and a brisk wind from the east as well will hold temperatures back in the mid-teens. But elsewhere, feeling warm enough in any sunny spells. Then going into the evening, the clear skies in the north will progress southwards, and so a chilly start for many of us on Thursday, but actually plenty of fine weather through the day, sunny spells and feeling pleasant. But into the weekend, more rain to come.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays continue in County Durham on the northbound A1M. The motorway is partly blocked just after junction 60, the Bradbury exit, not being helped by the fact restrictions were already in place for those ongoing emergency barrier repairs, of course. And in the West Midlands, the A41, the Warwick Road, remains closed through Tyseley. So this is just southeast of Birmingham city centre at the scene of an accident near Roma Road. On the M40 in Oxfordshire, one lane's closed heading north from junction 8, 8 and 9 from the Oxford services towards the Bicester exit at the scene of an accident. In East London at Harold Wood, the Colchester Road, the A12 blocked heading into town near to the Tangent Link Business Park because of a collision. London Overground can't run from Hackney Downs to Walthamstow Central because of a track fault. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
There's still... It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the House of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Robert Jenrick says he wants to retire Nigel Farage. James Cleverly said Nigel Farage is not one of us. Reform is a pale imitation of us. We don't need to be a pale imitation of them. But Jacob Rees-Mogg says Kemi Badenoch was wrong to dismiss Nigel Farage. He's not even at the Conservative Party conference, but they're all talking about Nigel Farage. We'll be live from the scene directly soon from Birmingham. And over the past 2 days at the Tory party conference, GB News' political editor Chris Hope has grilled the final 4 Tory leadership hopefuls. Who fared the best? We'll get the top political analysis from all of our reporters and the politicians ahead of the final 2, exclusively battling it out live on GB News on October the 17th. And we've long suspected it, and now government data has proved that soaring immigration is making us all worse off. Plus, despite pledging to end asylum hotels today, the Labour Party admitted they will rely on them at a cost of £8 million every single week for another 3 years. Will our politicians ever take back control of our borders? And we'll get you the latest on the manhunt of the suspected acid attacker after a 14-year-old girl and a 16-year-old were taken to hospital suffering with potentially life-changing injuries. Our reporter Adam Cherry is live near where the incident took place. That's all coming in your next hour. Well, Nigel Farage isn't even anywhere near the Tory party conference, but they can't stop talking about him. Robert Jenrick says, I want to retire him. James Cleverly said, Nigel is not one of us. We will not do a deal with anybody who wants to destroy us. But only last night, Jacob Rees-Mogg was saying there should be some sort of pact, a non-aggression pact between Reform and the Tories if they are serious about kicking the Labour Party out of power. They're all talking about him, but they can't agree on what to do about him. Well, shortly, we'll cross to Birmingham and we'll speak to Jacob Rees-Mogg to see what he makes of all of this fuss about Nigel Farage. What do you think? Is it time to put differences to one side and do a deal, or should the Conservatives go it alone? Should the Reform Party never even bother dancing with the Tories? After all, they stood aside for them in 2019, gave the Tories an 8-seat majority, and where did it get them? Get in touch, GBNews.com/your say. But now here's your latest news headlines. Cameron Walker.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 3 minutes past 4. I'm Cameron Walker in the GB newsroom. The White House says that Iran is preparing to imminently launch a ballistic missile attack against Israel. It comes as tensions in the Middle East reach boiling point following the Israeli ground operation in southern Lebanon. The Israeli army says it's begun a targeted ground operation against the Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah, the first time since 2006 that Israeli boots have been on the grounds there. The Lebanese Prime Minister has described this as one of the most dangerous moments in their history. The UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy has repeated his call for Britons to leave Lebanon while they still can, warning the situation is volatile. A commercial flight to help British nationals escape Lebanon has been chartered by the UK government, who continues its calls for a ceasefire.
Our position remains the same. Having spoken to our American colleagues and other allies, we're calling for an immediate ceasefire. We need a diplomatic solution to the problems in Lebanon so that Israelis can go back to their home in northern Israel and Lebanese can return to their homes in southern Israel. So at this time, we want to see a political solution, the Amos Hochstein plan, which is on the table from the Americans, and an immediate ceasefire.
Conservative leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick has defended his comments on the UK Special Forces, where he claims they are killing rather than capturing terrorists. He also gave his views on Nigel Farage's Reform UK political party, suggesting its popularity is down to Tory failure.
My view of Reform is this. I think it's a symptom, not a cause. It exists in its current state because we failed. And by that I don't mean you, the members of the party. I mean, we in Westminster. We made promises, we didn't keep them. So I'm not going to disparage Reform. I think in a way that's denigrating the millions of people who vote for them, who are our people. What I am going to do is set out, with your support, to make them redundant, to retire Nigel Farage.
A 14-year-old girl has been left with potentially life-changing injuries after a suspected acid attack outside a school in West London. A boy aged 16 and a 27-year-old woman were also injured after the substance believed to be acidic was thrown at them outside Westminster Academy yesterday afternoon. Police believe the teenagers were approached by a lone suspect who was on an e-scooter with a member of staff left injured after she rushed to help. The suspect is described as a tall, slim, black man wearing dark clothing with his face obscured, possibly by a mask or balaclava. Now, 4 men have been sentenced for their part in the violence disorder and arson that took place in Hare Hills. Euston Dobre, Mark Mitchell, Milan Zamontsny and Celan Valentin Paligia were given a combined prison term of over 20 years. The 4 appeared via video link from HMP Leeds and were sentenced at Leeds Crown Court this afternoon, with 2 of the men assisted by a Romanian interpreter and 1 man assisted by a Czech interpreter. Changes to the price cap on consumer energy bills take effect this month following the announcements by the regulator Ofgem. Bill payers have been urged to give an accurate meter reading as gas and electricity prices rises take effect. A household in England, Wales and Scotland using a typical amount of gas and electricity will now see their annual bill rise by about £149 to £1,717. Experts have encouraged people to submit a meter reading as the change comes in so that they can avoid being charged on estimated usage at a higher rate. Now, the Prince of Wales, he's teamed up with football legend David Beckham to celebrate beating a £15 million target to replace London's ageing air ambulance helicopters. Prince William, who's patron of the London Air Ambulance charity, personally approached the former England captain to be the public face of a fundraising campaign. At RAF Northolt earlier today, the pair sat in the cockpit of one of the new aircraft, which was meant to fly Prince William to a central London hospital to meet former patients, but this was called off because of the weather. And another royal story, Buckingham Palace has announced Her Royal Highness the Princess Beatrice and her husband, Edoardo Mapelli-Mozzi, are expecting their second child together. Due in the early spring, the new arrival will be a sibling for the couple's daughter, Sienna, and the princess's stepson, Wolfie. The king has been informed, and both families are delighted with the news. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron. Now it's the third day of the Tory party conference and the race to succeed Rishi Sunak as party leader is certainly heating up. In the past few hours, Tory leadership finalists Robert Jenrick and James Cleverly have spoken to GB News' political editor Christopher Hope. And here's what Robert Jenrick first had to say.
My view of reform is this. I think it's a symptom, not a cause. It exists in its current state because we failed. And by that I don't mean you, the members of the party. I mean we in Westminster. We made promises, we didn't keep them. So I'm not going to disparage reform. I think in a way that's denigrating the millions of people who vote for them, who are our people. What I am going to do is set out, with your support, to make them redundant, to retire Nigel Farage.
Well, I don't think Nigel's in the mood for retiring. Last time I checked, he's not in pipe and slippers mode. But next, it was James Cleverly's turn to give his thoughts on Reform leader Nigel Farage.
We've got to recognise that we lost votes to Reform and the Lib Dems, and a whole load of Conservatives stayed at home. And if we want to win, we have to win back voters from Reform and the Lib Dems and those that stay at home. I think about half a dozen people across the country went directly to Labour, but not very many. So we need to demonstrate that we are a proper Conservative party, because Reform is a pale imitation of us. We don't need to be a pale imitation of them. We need to be the best version of us.
Nigel Farage, is he a Tory? Will you allow him in if he stops?
He's not a Tory. He's not a Tory. He's not. He never claims to be a Tory. He said he hates the Tories. He wants to destroy our party. He is not one of us. This is my family. This is my clan. These are the people I serve.
Well, fighting talk there from Messrs Cleverly and Jenrick. And let's go now to GB News presenter Tom Harwood, live in Birmingham. Tom Harwood, last year Nigel Farage stole the show when he was there, dancing with Priti Patel, getting mobbed by the selfie brigade. This year, he's not even there, but they can't stop talking about Nigel Farage. Tell us more.
Nigel Farage has been the figure, the spectre that has haunted this party, well, since around 2013, really. If we're going to look at those by-election results when he led UKIP, many people would say it was the threat of Nigel Farage and his various political parties that has moulded the policy position of the Conservative Party in power. Now out of power, still the ghost of Farage looms large over this conference. And it is a big, big question. Many people who voted for Reform UK are former Conservative voters. That's 4 million votes that people in this hall feel like could vote for the Conservative Party if it has the right offering. But clearly, no leadership contender is minded to take Nigel Farage into the party. They don't want a merger. Well, they're pretty perturbed by Nigel Farage's own words that he wants to destroy the Conservative Party. It must not be forgotten, these are two separate political parties that fought each other tooth and nail at the general election. But let's zoom out. Let's look at the wider race. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined here on the GB News stand by Lord Davies of Gower, now the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales. Lord Davies, the reason why you're the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales is, of course, down to your own talent and application and ability.
Absolutely.
But it's also because there are now no Conservative MPs in Wales. It has to be a member of the House of Lords.
Absolutely. I mean, that goes without saying. We lost all our MPs, sadly, some very, very good people, but we are where we are. And I was asked if I would take on the role of being the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales, which I've agreed to, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it, actually.
But it does show a pretty stark situation. 0 MPs in one of the constituent countries of the United Kingdom. This for the party that would want to describe itself as the natural party of government. What went wrong?
Tom, we've been there before and we've come back before. And I think once we get our new leader into place and we know where we're going with our policies, we get back out in the streets again. It's up to us to give that trust back to the people and say, look, you know, this is who we are now. This is where we want to go. Give us your support.
Now we can see behind us, obviously just as I say this, there's a gap, but lots of people are leaving Hall 5 where those big interviews with Christopher Hope have been taking place. They've been very full. Everyone's been listening intently to what these leadership candidates have to say. Looking from a bird's eye view, I know you haven't declared for any candidate. Who do you think is having the strongest campaign this week?
Well, the strongest campaign, it's a difficult question for me to answer, isn't it? I mean, I want to be fair to all of them, and I think if I was to answer that question, I'd probably give an indication of where I might want to go with it. So I think I'll give that one a miss, if I may, Tom. But I think they're all doing quite well, actually. I mean, there's a very good turnout in the hall, as you rightly say, for every candidate. And I'm just going to wait and see. For myself, I'll wait and see who the last two candidates are. I want to see what they're going to offer for Wales. That is my real concern. And then I will make my choice on that candidate.
Wales is such an interesting conundrum because there are many people who are natural Conservatives in Wales who are uneasy with the scale of devolution. Devolution was voted for by half of those who turned out in that referendum last century. It was on a turnout of around 50%. It never had the groundswell of support behind it than it did in Scotland. And now the Labour-led government in Wales is wanting to add dozens more politicians to what was once an assembly and is now a Senedd or a parliament in the way we describe it. I mean, how does that make sense when there are so many people who are uneasy about the scale of devolution?
Yeah, and I can, I agree that there is a very people are uneasy about the fact we're going to spend £120 million on 36 more politicians to Wales. It's quite unnecessary. We've got a health service that's on its knees. We've got an education system which is not delivering, and lots of other things that I could mention. And here we are. The Welsh Government's prioritising on 36 more members. I think it's absurd. So I can understand why people feel very uneasy about it. It's not something that we would do as a Conservative Party, and I would hope that when our new leader comes into place, he will or she will agree, and it's something that we would fight in the future.
Well, it'll be one to look out for. Lord Davies of Gower, Shadow Secretary of State for Wales, thank you so much for joining us here live on GB News. Back to you, Martin.
Tom, and thank you, Lord Davies. Tom, you've been magnificent there in Birmingham. Thanks for all your input, and we're back to you soon. Let's get back now to the studio. And I'm joined by Peter Edwards, the former editor of the Labour List. Always welcome in the studio. Pleasure to have your company. You were watching with a wry smile on your face there, the Conservatives talking about Nigel Farage. He does haunt the party. They're trying to position themselves accordingly. What I want to talk to you about, Peter, is from a Labour Party perspective, who would you most like to win this leadership debate and why?
Robert Jenrick is a front runner and he's already shown he's not up to the task. So to have a very quick history catch-up, 10 years ago he was a Cameroonian moderniser, newly elected, saying the Tories had to be in the centre ground. He then really had a total conversion to right-wing politics, some might say hard right, showing empathy with Nigel Farage, where they want to keep him out of the Tory party. He's a failed immigration minister who resigned in protest at his own immigration policy and is now campaigning on the immigration failures of the government of which he was a part. The other thing about Robert Jenrick is he hasn't learned the lessons of recent history, is that when you swing to the right, the Tories lose.
What about James Cleverly? James Cleverly gave his pitch today, and you said to me during the break there you thought he came across rather well. And stark contrast, what I thought was very interesting, Peter, was that Robert Jenrick's audience, they gasped when Robert Jenrick attacked Nigel, but when James Cleverly did, they were applauding. Two very different camps, two very different parties, but he's got pedigree, he's got experience. Is he the candidate the Labour Party might most fear if he wins?
He's certainly worthy of respect. He's a serious person. He's a military veteran, so I'd always want to show respect to someone that served in our armed forces. He speaks with great moderation, which is often a characteristic of someone who's been in the military. They show restraint in the way they choose their words. The issue for Cleverly, who held high office as Foreign Secretary and Home Secretary, will be exactly that faced by Ed Miliband and Ed Balls in 2010. Whatever the merits of the individual, it's very hard to go from being a senior government minister to running the opposition and then bouncing back into government with 4 or 5 years. It could be the next Tory Prime Minister, someone we've never heard of.
Wow. Peter Edwards, superb stuff as ever. And let's cross straight back now to the Tory Party conference. We've got a special guest as GBNews presenter. Tom Harwood is joined by former Tory MP Jacob Rees-Mogg. Tom, it was Sir Jacob last night who had the rose between his teeth, courting, wooing Nigel Farage. And today that's been trampled on by Messrs Cleverly and Jenrick. Over to you.
Yes, absolutely. Wooing Nigel Farage. Should Nigel Farage be more aligned with the Conservative Party? Should the Conservative Party be more aligned with Nigel Farage? It's a question that looms large over this conference. Jacob Rees-Mogg, you have, of course, made overtures towards the Reform Party, towards Nigel Farage, but not a single leadership contender is of that view. Why do you think that is?
It's interesting, not least because there have been some indications from Reform that's interested in this. But there was a little note in the email on Sunday, I think by Brendan Carlin, their political correspondent, saying that Reform was open to some sort of arrangement. And I think this is a real opportunity. I suppose the leadership contenders feel at the moment they're running to be leader of the Conservative Party, and it's too early to be going any further than that.
It's interesting because the Conservative Party is opposed by the Reform Party. There were bitter fights on the ground at the last election. There were many members of Parliament who lost their seats, whose margin of loss was smaller than that of the Reform vote share.
Well, including me.
Including yourself.
Including me.
Do you think if there was not a Reform candidate in your constituency in Somerset, that you would still be an MP today?
I don't know, but I think the important thing is to understand that the Tory party doesn't have a right to those votes. That we failed to inspire those people, those 4 million people who'd previously voted Conservative, to vote for us in 2024. It's our fault, not Reform's. When you go round this conference and you speak to members of the party, which I've done an enormous amount of in the last 48 hours, you find their views and Reform's views are very similar. The party membership and Reform members broadly have the same worldview. Now, there may be some within the party who are to the left of that, but actually not many in the broad membership.
One of the interesting things walking around this conference compared to years before is you're more likely to bump into a party member this year. I suppose this is the advantage of being out of government. Not so many lobbyists around.
Well, it's not that. Richard Fuller, the party chairman, deserves huge credit for making this a conference for members. We've actually allowed them to speak in the main hall of the conference, which hasn't happened in something like 20 years. So I did a debate with party members yesterday on freedom of speech, and it was wonderful. People were queuing up at the microphones to express the views of our wonderful members. I think that's so good, and Richard deserves a lot of credit for changing it.
Yeah, I have to say, having come from the Labour Party conference, the Lib Dem conference, that is how they've done things for years and years. But to the point of Nigel Farage, this is perhaps the worst election result possible if you want a merger. If the Tory party did a lot worse and perhaps wasn't even the official opposition, the Canada 1993 scenario, perhaps a merger would have been inevitable. If Reform had received one MP or no MPs, perhaps a merger would be inevitable. And yet, what happened was the Tories did just well enough to feel like this isn't existential, but Reform got a beachhead in Parliament too. In many ways, that scenario actually makes a merger that's sort of the hardest scenario to foresee.
I think any Tory who thinks losing over half your votes is not a pretty serious electoral setback is in cloud cuckoo land. But you don't necessarily need a formal merger. For many years in the late 19th century, the Tories and the Liberal Unionists didn't oppose each other, but they didn't become one party until much later. Now, there are 89 seats in which Reform came second to Labour. What is the point in the Conservatives fighting an aggressive campaign in those seats? Surely we would rather have Reform win than Labour win.
Many of those 89 seats, almost all of those 89 seats, had Conservative MPs until 3 months ago. Are you really suggesting that the Conservative Party...
No, I'm not. I think we'd need to check that, because these are 89 seats, Labour first, Reform second. There wasn't a huge... There were some seats where we went...
I would wager it's the majority were...
There are some seats where we went from first to third, but not that many.
I would wager...
Well, I think we need to do the analysis.
We'll look at the data. But yes, I think that is an interesting proposition. Of course, none of the leadership contenders are making that proposition. You say that they're not ready to make that at this stage, but what if they just don't want to?
Well, we've got some years before an election. We'll have to see how the opinion polls go. There are some people who think that Reform will just disappear, will evaporate in a puff of Nigel Farage's Marlborough Light smoke. But I don't think that's likely. I think Nigel is such a formidable politician. You have to take him seriously. And this is now a much broader party than UKIP. It's not a one-issue party. It's looking at immigration. It's looking at the economy. It's looking crucially at net zero. And the Tory party needs to get a new policy on net zero, because that's making the country cold and poor. And people voting for Reform who were Tories recognise that.
Is there a risk here that, because obviously, looking at the economics of it, there are lots of questions one can ask about net zero. It's hugely popular in the country. When you poll the idea of net zero, it is very, very popular. One of the analysis, perhaps, is that the idea that Rishi Sunak was going against some elements of it might have lost some votes. Is there an issue with focusing too much on the 4 million people that voted for Reform, but not the 3.5 million who voted for the Lib Dems, or the more than 10 million who voted for Labour, or the biggest group of all, those who didn't vote at all?
Well, we lost 4 million votes to Reform. We lost 2.3 million votes who didn't vote, who had been Conservative, about 700,000 who went to Lib Dems, Labour and Greens combined. Don't govern by opinion polls. When you say to people, are you a good person who wants a clean planet? Of course people say yes. When you say to them, do you want your price of electricity to be double that in the United States? They're less keen. And that's where governments have to make the choices to make people better off, to improve their standard of living. The net zero green ideology is making people cold and poor, and they won't vote for that.
You were a member of a government that had net zero as a policy, where...
Well, it was done by Theresa May before I got into government.
Which is why I said you weren't a member.
It remained it.
It had it as a policy.
It remained it, yes.
And ministers that you sat around the cabinet table with would go out and say, isn't it wonderful, renewable energy, it's the cheapest form of energy altogether, and yet it sees prices in the UK double that of America. Was that a dishonest messaging strategy from your cabinet colleagues, and particularly your friend Boris Johnson?
No, they believed it. Boris thought we could make Britain the Saudi Arabia of wind, and I'm not convinced by any of that. And when I was briefly Energy Secretary, I was trying to row back on this, though I wasn't there for very long, and we put it into law very stupidly, one of the last and most expensive legacies of Theresa May.
Well, Jacob Rees-Mogg. It's been a fascinating conversation. More, of course, with you at 8 p.m. this evening. As usual, State of the Nation with Jacob. Now, back to you, Martin.
Tom Harwood, that was an excellent interview, lightly flambéed, skewered and grilled. A veritable mixed grill of Jacob Rees-Mogg. And, of course, you can catch Jacob tonight, State of the Nation, from 8 p.m. Now, a US official says Iran is preparing to launch a missile attack against Israel. We'll have the latest on that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Well, the first thing on in my mind when I heard about this is, what has this country come to when we're talking about getting kids as young as 6 years old to be jabbed weekly or however often it is because they are too fat? Where are the parents in all of this? There's three things actually here that are important. Number one is we do not know the long-term consequences of these jabs. So if I had a child and I was going to let them have the jab, I would be feeling like I'm treating them like a lab rat, to be quite honest with you, because we don't know the long-term consequences. Secondly, the manufacturers are clear that some of the potential side effects can be very serious. We're talking about potentially pancreatitis, let's get my word out, and also it lists as a potential side effect thyroid cancer. Arguably, it's called the gamble jab, to be honest with you, because of these potential side effects at the moment. And then thirdly, I come back to the parents. Where are the parents in all of this? Because they are the role models. So it really is about parenting, and it's about parenting from being a role model yourself in terms of being slim and healthy and not expecting a jab to take your place and other people to take your place. If you have children, they are your responsibility. Think before you breed. The other thing you need to remember with this is when you stop taking that jab, it is highly likely that you're going to put all the weight back on. Now, the thought of a child of 6 years of age, starting with that jab, conditioning them mentally to live with that jab, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely not on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:29. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. As the situation in the Middle East continues to escalate, the United States have received indications that Iran is preparing to launch a ballistic missile attack on Israel. And for the latest on this, I'm joined by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, the Middle East is on the edge. Bring us up to speed.
Well, yeah, the very latest line we've got from the US State Department is that all US personnel, all government employees in Israel and their families are being ordered to shelter in place until further notice. Clearly, the intelligence from the US military intelligence, the intelligence agencies is telling them that there is indeed an imminent ballistic missile attack being planned now by Iran. What you're looking at the moment are shots of Tel Aviv. the skyline there as people clearly absorb what many probably suspected was a potential outcome of the escalating situation between Hezbollah and the Israeli military, with the fighting in the north of the country. And of course, we know for coming up to a year now about the fighting in and around Gaza. But I think it's that escalation in terms of Israel's decision to take the fight to Hezbollah, to try to get Hezbollah out of those areas of southern Lebanon, to push them further north so that they were not the same kind of threat that they were posing to Israeli citizens in the north of Israel, who've endured thousands, more than 8,000 missiles, drones and rockets, Martin, that have been launched by this terrorist group over the past year down into Israel. Israel has said enough is enough, and it needs to deal with Hezbollah at this point.
And of course, Mark White, we approach that talismanic anniversary of October the 7th, and America has just said in this past hour there'll be severe consequences if there is any ballistic missile attack from Iran onto Israel, but that's looking increasingly likely. Thank you, Mark White, for bringing us up to speed about the precarious situation there in Israel and across the Middle East. Thank you very much. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock as the manhunt is underway for a school acid attacker. We'll be speaking to someone who knows what it's like to go through the unimaginable trauma of an acid attack. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Cameron Walker.
It's 4:32. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. Now, as you've been hearing, the White House says that Iran is preparing to imminently launch a ballistic missile attack against Israel. It comes as tensions in the Middle East reach boiling point following the Israeli ground operation in southern Lebanon. The Israeli army says it's begun a targeted ground operation against the Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah, the first time since 2006 that Israeli boots have been on the grounds there. The Lebanese Prime Minister has described this as one of the most dangerous moments in their history. These are live pictures of Tel Aviv in Israel here. The UK's Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has repeated his call for Britons to leave Lebanon while they still can, warning the situation is volatile. A commercial flight to help British nationals escape Lebanon has been chartered by the UK government, who continues its calls for a ceasefire. Conservative leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick has defended his comments on the UK Special Forces, where he claims they are killing rather than capturing terrorists. He also gave his views on Nigel Farage's Reform UK political party, suggesting its popularity is down to Tory failure. Now, a 14-year-old girl has been left with potentially life-changing injuries after a suspected acid attack outside a school in West London. A boy aged 16 and a 27-year-old woman were also injured after the substance, believed to be acidic, was thrown at them outside Westminster Academy yesterday afternoon. Police believe the teenagers were approached by a lone suspect who was on an e-scooter, with a member of staff left injured after she rushed to help. The suspect is described as a tall, slim, black male, wearing dark clothing with his face obscured possibly by a mask or balaclava. 4 men have been sentenced for their part in the violence disorder and arson that took place in Hare Hills. Euston Dobre, Mark Mitchell, Milan Zemonsny and Selan Valentin Pelagia were given a combined prison term of over 20 years. The 4 appeared via video link from HMP Leeds and were sentenced this afternoon at Leeds Crown Court, with 2 men assisted by a Romanian interpreter and 1 man assisted by a Czech interpreter. Now, changes to the price cap on consumer energy bills take effect this month following the announcements by the regulator Ofgem. Bill payers have been urged to give an accurate meter reading as gas and electricity price rises take effect to avoid being charged on an estimated usage at the higher rate. A household in England, Wales and Scotland using a typical amount of gas and electricity will now see their annual bills rise by about £149 to £1,717 a year. And Buckingham Palace has announced Her Royal Highness Princess Beatrice and her husband Edoardo Mapelli-Mozzi are expecting their second child together. During the early spring, the new arrival will be the sibling for the couple's daughter Sienna and the princess's stepson Wolfie. The King has been informed and both families are delighted with the news. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's becoming drier from the west, but it's taking a time with still a lot of cloud across the UK and some showery rain. That rain, well, it's causing some issues across the east of England, and it will continue into the evening as the area of low pressure that's been with us for some days slowly pulls away. So some wet weather to come for East Anglia and the southeast overnight. Otherwise, the rain in the east tends to turn lighter and more showery as the night progresses, but we keep a lot of cloud for much of England and Wales. The clearest skies overnight will be for Scotland and Northern Ireland, 1 or 2 showers. Otherwise, under those clear skies, temperatures falling into the mid or even low single figures in some sheltered spots. But that's where we've got the brightest weather to start off Wednesday. Northern Ireland and Scotland, plenty of blue skies. Quite a difference from much of central, eastern and southern England, where there's a lot of low cloud, some mist and murk and some drizzle. Likewise for central and eastern Wales, but West Wales will see much brighter skies. Northern England turning brighter through the morning. Scotland and Northern Ireland, meanwhile, apart from 1 or 2 showers in the east, we'll see plenty of sunny skies. And we keep the sunshine across western Scotland and Northern Ireland throughout Wednesday. That's the place to be for widespread blue skies. And actually it's looking brighter for Northern England and North Wales. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover. And we've got these showers continuing to roll into East Anglia, the East Midlands and the southeast through the day. So that's going to make it feel a little less pleasant, and a brisk wind from the east as well will hold temperatures back in the mid-teens. But elsewhere, feeling warm enough in any sunny spells. Then going into the evening, the clear skies in the north will progress southwards, and so a chilly start for many of us on Thursday, but actually plenty of fine weather through the day, sunny spells and feeling pleasant. But into the weekend, more rain to come.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. On the A1M in County Durham, the motorway is partly blocked northbound, about a mile north of the Bradbury Interchange, junction 60. That is at the scene of an accident, not helping matters as there have been emergency repair works taking place along that stretch for the last few days. On the M6 in Warwickshire, the inside lane is closed southbound from junction 2 to 1 near Coventry, and the scene of an accident, and 2 lanes are closed on the M5 northbound through Gloucestershire from junction 13 to 12 towards Gloucester. Emergency barrier repair works are underway. In East London, the A12 is closed heading into the capital through Harold Wood. There's been a collision near the Tangent Link Business Park, and London Overground trains are suspended out of Hackney Downs to Walthamstow Central. There was a track fault, and trains are also suspended northbound between Lancaster and Carlisle for emergency engineering work. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the Metropolitan Police have launched a manhunt after a suspected acid attack took place at the Westminster Academy School in central London yesterday. 2 pupils and 1 teacher are thought to be among the victims, with the injuries of a 14-year-old schoolgirl described as possibly life-changing. And GB News reporter Adam Cherry has the latest.
Police were called to this road yesterday at around 4:40 in the afternoon to attend to 3 victims, 2 pupils and 1 member of staff who had been attacked by what is believed to be an acidic substance by a young suspect who is described as a slim, tall, black male wearing dark clothing and a mask or balaclava to obscure his appearance. He drove along this road behind me on an e-scooter and very quickly darted away after committing this assault. Police officers are looking for any information available, eyewitnesses. They're particularly interested in dash cam footage. That will be especially helpful in these circumstances. And all of this can be reported anonymously as the Metropolitan Police continue their investigation.
And as the manhunt continues for that attacker, I'm joined now by Andreas Christoforos, who was left blind in one eye after being attacked with acid 10 years ago. He joins me now. Thank you for joining us, Andreas. Every time you hear these stories on television, it must re-traumatise you about what you went through 10 years ago. Would you mind please sharing with us today your experience, what happened to you?
Yeah, these stories are always very saddening to hear. So in 2014, I was working from home. I opened my front door to an unknown man just before Christmas and instantly received a pint of sulfuric acid to the face. He said, "This is for you, mate," and then ran. Obviously, the attack left me with life-changing injuries, blind in one eye, full facial scarring, and scarring down my torso and down my arms. And I still, 10 years on, and I'm still regularly having surgery to deal with the injuries caused by the attack.
And Andreas, am I correct in saying the attack was random? It was a case of mistaken identity?
Yeah, so not necessarily random, but yeah, it's mistaken identity. It turned up at the wrong house.
Okay, and that was 10 years ago. You're having all this surgery still. Why do you think people do this? What is their motive to do something so life-changing and so obviously visible? Why?
I think that the word there is life-changing. People are using acid as a weapon to inflict pain. They don't use acid as a weapon to kill. They use it to inflict long-term pain, and they know they can use acid as a weapon. Firstly, it's very quick to use. It's done under surprise. By the time it's been thrown, the damage has already been done. And the ramifications for such attacks, that they aren't strict enough. The penalties for acid crime in this country still are not strict enough.
And how would you like to see that change? I mean, there's been a huge escalation in the numbers. We've seen a 75% increase in the past year. There are over 1,240 attacks last year. Of course, the case of Abdulazidi, that wasn't acid, it was an alkali, but nevertheless, the outcome is very similar. How would you like to see the sentencing beefed up, Andreas?
Without a doubt, I firmly believe tougher sentences are really needed here. They are the ultimate deterrent. We can educate, we can restrict, we can make it much harder for them to get access to the corrosive substances. But as we've seen with knife crime, as we've seen with gun crime, if people want to get their hands on them, they still do. The ultimate deterrent is tougher sentences, and we've yet to see a sentence given to an attacker that really fits the crime.
And what would you like to see? What, a kind of compulsory, immediate, mandatory custodial sentence of how long?
I firmly believe that anybody who uses a corrosive substance as a weapon should be facing life with a minimum term of 20 years, no matter the severity of the injuries.
And Andreas, as difficult as it is to kind of relive your experience, we've got a 14-year-old schoolgirl now who was leaving school with a friend and her teacher. A random, well, it wouldn't be random, it would be a targeted attack, a passerby still at large. Going back to those days, your early days, what do you think this poor girl will be going through?
She will have no clue of the journey she has to make to survive in terms of building her life back up. She will survive in terms of not dying, but then there's still a huge risk of dying in terms of infection. If she gets past the first hurdle, that is not getting infected, she's got to rebuild her life. And for a 14-year-old girl, that's going to be very, very, very tough. It's very difficult to put into words the journey, the effort, the strength she has to muster to get to where she needs to be.
And presumably, Andreas, that is why these grotesque people use this as a method of a violation of changing for life, because that's the point. It's set out, is it not, to specifically maim, injure and change people and destroy people's lives forever and leave that haunting legacy.
Without a doubt, we all know that people who are attacked with any corrosive substance, both alkaline or acid, the injuries are very severe and they're long-lasting. I'm going to be wearing the scars till the day I die. I have treatment in London every month. I'm away for surgery for 5 weeks in November this year, complimentary of Face Forward International, charity that I represent over in America. There's no getting away from it. I firmly believe I'll have to wear the scars till the day I die. There's no magic cure. There's no getting away from it.
And how are you?
I'm one to take life by the horns. I do all right. I don't like to wallow in self-pity. I've built my life back up to a different life than what I had before, but I'm happy.
Andreas Christoforous, immensely brave. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences and trying to help us make some sense of these tragic and traumatic crimes. Andreas Christoforous, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on GB News. Wow, what do you say to that? Astonishing, isn't it? Just one day your life is completely and utterly different from what it was before. Heaven knows what that teenage girl is going through right now. Well, despite pledging to end asylum hotels today, the Labour Party admitted that they will rely on them at a cost of £8 million per week, every week, for another 3 years. Will our politicians ever take back control of our borders? That's next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
So I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm going to see your show, Behind the Shoulder Pads, one night only at the Adelphi Theatre, October the 22nd. You're talking about your extraordinary life. Stage, screen, published author, 19
TV,
books, TV, most important.
Yeah.
Is there anyone who's managed to straddle, 7, 8 decades in showbiz and still be at the top?
Yes. I was thinking about that the other day because somebody said, you know, the last of good. There is a Shirley MacLaine.
Sure.
She started the same time as me.
Right.
Sophia Loren.
Yeah.
She started around the same time.
She's not working much, though.
It's true, she's not, but she's still out there being, you know, a major icon. And of course, people like Dick Van Dyke, who's just almost 100.
Yeah, he's incredible,
you know,
isn't he?
I'm a mere babe next to him.
You are. But and I was thinking about, you've written some extraordinary, wicked, waspish diaries, which of course you can because you've worked with so many people. Look at the names: Frank Sinatra, Lana Turner, Elizabeth Taylor, Dean Martin, Gregory Peck,
Richard Burton,
Paul Newman. The list goes on.
Gene Kelly,
and
my
Gene
favourite.
Kelly. Was he your favourite?
Yes.
Why?
Because I saw him in a movie when I was a little girl called For Me and My Gal with Judy Garland, and I just fell in love with him. It's such a cute movie. Well, they don't make movies like that anymore. And then I was lucky enough when I first went to Hollywood at age 20 to meet him and literally hang out with him and his friends. And then I put him in a movie with me that I produced. He played my husband in a movie called Sins. And he was wonderful. He was really wonderful.
The People's Channel.
Mark Dolan Tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:49. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, we've long suspected it, all of us watching this show, and now that the government data has proved that soaring immigration is making all of us worse off. Plus, despite pledging to end asylum hotels today, the Labour Party admitted they will rely on them at a cost of £8 million every single week for another, wait for it, 3 years. Will our politicians ever take back control of our borders? It's a question I put many times to my next guest, and that's Dr. Mike Jones, the Executive Director of Migration Watch. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jones. Here we are again. It's Groundhog Day, but this time we knew it, we suspected it, your data's been showing it. Now the official data proves it. ONS data, GDP per capita is going down. The more people coming into the country, the worse our living standards get. Tell us more.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, the idea that immigration boosts the economy and that the more you pump into the system, the larger your economy grows is a complete misconception. I mean, listen, if you increase your population size, you're going to increase GDP, but that's not a true measure of wealth. Ultimately, it's GDP per capita. I mean, for example, during the Thatcher years, GDP per capita rose between 1980 to 1990 by 29%. The Thatcher government had very little net migration. Some years it was negative, other years it was slightly positive. But ultimately, the reason why the Thatcher government increased growth in the economy was due to her domestic policies, investment in the population, deregulation of certain aspects of the economy, and ultimately sort of investments in skills and how the economy actually functions in terms of finance and capital regulations. But today's statistics basically debunk the idea that, embracing this policy of human quantitative easing, where you simply just, have more boots on the ground, increases growth, real growth per capita, that's a complete fallacy.
And that's the first failure in the news today, Mike. The second one, of course, is this idea that the Labour Party said, we're going to end asylum hotels, but they can't. They simply can't do that. In fact, it's now going to continue for another 3 years. Who are they blaming for this?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, in the UK, it's illegal to allow asylum seekers to be destitute. So if somebody applies for asylum, you have to house them. Hotels were the first option because obviously this doesn't put pressure on the private rental market, but it imposes a huge cost on the taxpayer. And obviously, if you move them into the private rental market, which is what's happening now, then that's going to have a knock-on effect on British citizens in terms of their rents. There's no way around this unless you actually start deporting people. That's the key thing. Asylum policy, or I should say illegal migration policy, ultimately comes down to whether you can deport people. If you can't, then you're racking up the burdens on the taxpayer, on British society, and on social cohesion. And the Labour Party, I'm afraid, they have a few good ideas. They want to fast-track deportations to safe countries. I agree with that. But they have no policy for people who arrive from unsafe countries, or should I say countries deemed unsafe by the human rights authorities. They've mothballed Rwanda. They have no intention of amending the Human Rights Act. They have no policy on the European Court of Human Rights. Yeah, it's going to get worse. And
it's interesting. And it's interesting, Mike, there's data out today about the council house waiting lists, and the Labour councils will be housing 4 times as many asylum seekers as the Conservative councils. And, of course, there are a lot more Labour councils now coming to a street near you soon. Dr. Mike Jones, thank you very much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you. Now stick around because we're going back to the Conservative Party conference next. And guess what? He's not even at the Conservative Party conference, but they're all talking about Nigel Farage. We'll be live from Birmingham next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now here's your weather. It's Aidan McGibbon.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's becoming drier from the west, but it's taking a time with still a lot of cloud across the UK and some showery rain. That rain, well, it's causing some issues across the east of England, and it will continue into the evening as the area of low pressure that's been with us for some days slowly pulls away. So some wet weather to come for East Anglia and the southeast overnight. Otherwise, the rain in the east tends to turn lighter and more showery as the night progresses, but we keep a lot of cloud for Much of England and Wales. The clearest skies overnight will be for Scotland and Northern Ireland. 1 or 2 showers. Otherwise, under those clear skies, temperatures falling into the mid or even low single figures in some sheltered spots. That's where we've got the brightest weather to start off Wednesday. Northern Ireland and Scotland, plenty of blue skies. Quite a difference from much of central, eastern and southern England, where there's a lot of low cloud, some mist and murk and some drizzle. Likewise for central and eastern Wales, but West Wales will see much brighter skies. Northern England turning brighter through the morning. Scotland and Northern Ireland, meanwhile, apart from 1 or 2 showers in the east, we'll see plenty of sunny skies. And we keep the sunshine across western Scotland and Northern Ireland throughout Wednesday. That's the place to be for widespread blue skies. And actually, it's looking brighter for Northern England and North Wales. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover. And we've got these showers continuing to roll into East Anglia, the East Midlands, and the southeast through the day. So that's going to make it feel a little less pleasant, and a brisk wind from the east as well will hold temperatures back in the mid-teens. But elsewhere, feeling warm enough in any sunny spells. Then going into the evening, the clear skies in the north will progress southwards, and so a chilly start for many of us on Thursday, but actually plenty of fine weather through the day, sunny spells and feeling pleasant. But into the weekend, more rain to come.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. The A1M in County Durham down to a single lane northbound once again today from junction 60 to 61. Those emergency repairs are still taking place north of the Bradbury interchange, not being helped by an earlier collision. And there are long delays of about an hour and a half on the M5 northbound in Gloucestershire. Just south of Gloucester, there was a collision from junction 13 to 12 that's now been cleared, but it's still really slow along the A38 through Whitminster as you were avoiding. In East London, the A12 is closed heading into the capital at Harold Wood, and the scene of an accident near the Tangent Link Business Park in South East London. The Kidbrooke Park Road closed at Kidbrooke for accident investigation work. And London Overground trains are suspended out of Hackney Downs to Walthamstow Central with severe delays from Walthamstow Central to Chingford. It's all down to a track fault. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good luck.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30am, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11pm till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6am on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Robert Jenrick says he wants to retire Nigel Farage. James cleverly said Nigel Farage is not one of us. Reform is a pale imitation of us, and we don't need to be a pale imitation of them. But Jacob Rees-Mogg says Kemi Badenoch was wrong to dismiss Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage is not even at the Conservative Party conference, but everybody is talking about Nigel. We'll be live from the Tory Party conference in Birmingham. And over the past 2 days at the Tory Party conference, GB News' political editor Chris Hope has grilled the final 4 Tory leadership hopefuls. But who fared the best? We'll get the full analysis and reaction from our man on the ground, Chris Hope, ahead of the final 2 exclusively battling it out on GB News on October the 17th. And we've long suspected it, and now government data has proved that soaring immigration is making us all worse off. Plus, despite pledging to end asylum hotels, today the Labour Party admitted they will rely on them at a cost of £8 million every single week for another 3 years. Will our politicians ever take back control of our borders? And we'll get you the latest on the manhunt of the horrific suspected acid attack after a 14-year-old girl and a 16-year-old were taken to hospital suffering with potentially life-changing injuries. Our reporter Adam Cherry is live now where the incident took place, and that's all coming up in your next hour. Well, last year, Nigel Farage stole the show at the Tory party conference just by turning up and by dancing with Priti Patel. This year, he's not even there, and they can't stop talking about Nigel Farage. Robert Jenrick said he wants to make him redundant. He wants to retire Nigel Farage. Well, the last time I checked, Nigel wasn't in the mood for pipe, slippers and stair lifts. James Cleverly, meanwhile, says Nigel is not one of us. There'll be no deals with a man who wants to destroy our party. Are they missing a trick? Should they be going to Nigel Farage with a rose between their teeth, not with war in their words? Let me know your thoughts. GBNews.com/your say. But now your headlines. And here's Cameron Walker.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 5. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. The White House says that Iran is preparing to imminently launch a ballistic missile attack against Israel. It comes as tensions in the Middle East reach boiling points following the Israeli ground operation in southern Lebanon. The Israeli army says it's begun a targeted ground operation against the Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah, the first time since 2006 that Israeli boots have been on the grounds there. The Lebanese Prime Minister has described this as one of the most dangerous moments in their history. The UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy has repeated his call for Britons to leave Lebanon while they still can, warning the situation is volatile. A commercial flight to help British nationals escape Lebanon has been chartered by the UK government, who continues its calls for a ceasefire.
Our position remains the same. Having spoken to our American colleagues and other allies, we're calling for an immediate ceasefire. We need a diplomatic solution to the problems in Lebanon so that Israelis can go back to their home in northern Israel and Lebanese can return to their homes in southern Israel. So at this time, we want to see a political solution, the Amos Hochstein plan, which is on the table from the Americans, and an immediate ceasefire.
In other news, Conservative leadership hopefuls Robert Jenrick and James Cleverly have hit out at Nigel Farage's Reform UK party. Mr Jenrick has suggested the party's popularity is down to Tory failure and broken promises. And James Cleverly ruled out a deal with Farage to win back voters. The candidates were speaking on the stage at the Conservative Party conference this afternoon.
I think it's a symptom, not a cause. It exists in its current state because we failed. And by that I don't mean you, the members of the party, I mean we in Westminster.
We need to demonstrate that we are a proper Conservative party, because Reform is a pale imitation of us. We don't need to be a pale imitation of them.
A 14-year-old girl has been left with potentially life-changing injuries after a suspected acid attack outside a school in West London. A boy aged 16 and a 27-year-old woman were also injured after the substance, believed to be acidic, was thrown at them outside Westminster Academy yesterday afternoon. Police believe the teenagers were approached by a lone suspect who was on an e-scooter with a member of staff left injured after she rushed to help. The suspect is described as a tall, slim, black male wearing dark clothing with his face obscured possibly by a mask or balaclava. Now, 4 men have been sentenced for their part in the violence disorder and arson that took place in Hare Hills. Euston Dobre, Mark Mitchell, Milan Demonsny and Celan Valentin Palagia were given a combined prison term of over 20 years. The 4 appeared via video link from HMP Leeds and were sentenced this afternoon at Leeds Crown Court. 2 of them were assisted by Romanian interpreters and 1 man assisted by a Czech interpreter. Now, changes to the price cap on consumer energy bills take effect this month following the announcements by the regulator Ofgem. Bill payers have been urged to give an accurate meter reading as gas and electricity price rises take effect to avoid being charged on estimated usage at the higher rate. A household in England, Wales and Scotland using a typical amount of gas and electricity will now see their annual bills rise by about £149 to £1,717 a year. New rules have come into force banning businesses from withholding tips or service charges from their staff. 100% of tips must now be shared between restaurant, pub, hairdressers and taxi employees due to a new law that comes into effect today. Hospitality industry bosses, however, have warned the move could hit under-pressure businesses with an additional cost. The Prince of Wales has teamed up with football legend David Beckham to celebrate beating a £15 million target to replace London's ageing air ambulance helicopters. Prince William, who's patron of the London Air Ambulance charity, personally approached the former England captain to be the public face of a fundraising campaign. At RAF Northolt earlier today, the pair sat in the cockpit of one of those new aircraft, which was meant to also fly Prince William to a central London hospital this afternoon to meet former patients, but this was called off due to bad weather. And Buckingham Palace has announced Her Royal Highness Princess Beatrice and her husband, Edoardo Mapelli-Mozzi, are expecting their second child together. Due in the early spring next year, the new arrival will be the sibling for the couple's daughter Sienna and the princess's stepson Wolfie, who you can see on your screens now. The King has been informed and both families are delighted with the news. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron. Now it's the third day of the Tory party conference and the race to succeed Rishi Sunak as party leader is certainly heating up. In the past couple of hours, Tory leadership finalists Robert Jenrick and James Cleverly have spoken to GB News' political editor Christopher Hope. Now here's what Mr Jenrick had to say.
My view of reform is this. I think it's a symptom, not a cause. It exists in its current state because we failed. And by that I don't mean you, the members of the party. I mean, we in Westminster. We made promises, we didn't keep them. So I'm not going to disparage reform. I think in a way that's denigrating the millions of people who vote for them, who are our people. What I am going to do is set out, with your support, to make them redundant, to retire Nigel Farage.
I don't think Nigel's up for retiring anytime soon. But anyway, look, next it was James Cleverly's turn to give his thoughts on Reform leader Nigel Farage. Here's what he said.
We've got to recognise that we lost votes to Reform and the Lib Dems and a whole load of Conservatives stayed at home. And if we want to win, we have to win back voters from Reform and the Lib Dems and those that stay at home. I think about half a dozen people across the country went directly to Labour, but not very many. So we need to demonstrate that we are a proper Conservative party because Reform is a pale imitation of us. We don't need to be a pale imitation of them. We need to be the best version of us.
Nigel Farage, is he a Tory? Will you allow him in if he stops?
He's not a Tory. He's not a Tory. He's not. He never claims to be a Tory. He said he hates the Tories. He wants to destroy our party. He is not one of us. This is my family. This is my clan. These are the people I serve.
Well, that was Mr Cleverly putting the boot in, but not all Conservatives were as critical. And former MP Jacob Rees-Mogg was happy to defend Nigel Farage.
There are some people who think that reform will just disappear, will evaporate in a puff of Nigel Farage's Marlborough Light smoke. But I don't think that's likely. I think Nigel is such a formidable politician. You have to take him seriously. And this is now a much broader party than UKIP. It's not a one-issue party. It's looking at immigration. It's looking at the economy. It's looking crucially at net zero. And the Tory party needs to get a new policy on net zero because that's making the country cold and poor. And people voting for reform who were Tories recognise that.
Excellent stuff. And let's go now to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who over the last couple of days has interviewed all of the 4 Tory leadership contenders. Chris, got to say, you've flambéed them, you've skewered them, you've lightly grilled them. A veritable mixed grilling of Tory party candidates. Excellent work. But I can't help but noticing, Chris, they're all talking about the man who's not even there, Mr. Nigel Farage.
Martin, great to see you again on your programme. I mean, yeah, they are talking about Nigel Farage. To be fair to the 4 contenders, I do ask about Nigel Farage because that's what I think members want to hear about, GB News viewers and listeners. Look, I've done 4 hours of hard graft interviewing these 4 leadership contenders in front of 1,900 party members on the main stage at the conference. And what have I learned? I think that there's quite a clear choice. All 4 of them could be the Tory party leader. That's what I reckon. Individually, they've all got different strengths. Now, Kevin Meagher, I think, is offering a complete revolution in this party if she wins. She's going to rethink what a Tory is, who should they be appealing to, what they think about. And we know she's going to, where she sits on key areas like tax and the like. But I think she's going to really shake up what it means to be the leader of the opposition in the 3rd decade of this century. And maybe that's what the Tory party wants. They've got 121 MPs. Time for a boss who makes some noise. And then you've got, of course, Tom Tugendhat. He's got authority, ex-military. He's kind of soft right, maybe centrist Tory leader. He won't upset the apple cart. He'll be very firm on things like security. That may be what the voters want. Today I spoke to Robert Jenrick. He's enthusiastic, keen. He's been on the journey from left to right in the party. He'll be energetic in taking the fight to Labour, but will it be too much for the base? And then James Cleverly, the last one there, he got a standing ovation at the end. He's quite blokey. He hasn't really moved very far since he backed Boris Johnson in 2008 and Brexit in 2016 before he's popular. He was interesting too, and he may come through on the rails alongside the other 3 and may beat them. I think it's all to play for, but the person who knows what's going on in this party is someone called Bob Blackman. Now, Bob Blackman is chairman of the 1922 Committee of Tory MPs. It's his rules that have set this debate, and he's here now. Bob, great to have you here.
Thanks, Chris.
Just today, I asked Robert Jenrick, I asked James Cleverly, and I also asked this of Kevin Meagher and Tom Tugendhat, will you want to end this leadership campaign early, before the budget on October 30th? 3 of them said yes. Why won't you?
The reality is we set the timetable at the same time as we opened nominations. We knew what the timetable was going to be. We've set this in such a way to, as you say, so the members get the chance to see 4 candidates at conference. We will then in Parliament next week slim down the list to 2. They'll then get a vote. And here is the clear issue. We have to send out the ballot papers or electronic codes to all the party membership. They have to receive them, have the chance to vote. If we were to shorten the contest, it means that if anyone doesn't receive their letter, they'll be complaining they haven't received their letter.
Not a legal action issue.
Well, it's all about, well, it could distort the picture. And we know that there'll be some people that don't receive their letters for one reason or another, and they'll need to get a replacement. That's why we need this length of time to actually make sure that everyone gets the chance to vote, votes accordingly.
Okay.
Then we come back to leading the party after the 2nd of November.
So you set the security of the ballot against this budget on October 30th. As things stand, you've got Rishi Sunak, the outgoing Prime Minister, who may not be around for the full Parliament if he decides to leave politics. We don't know. Let's assume he is there. But he's leaving stage left. Why not engineer it so the leader you are electing over this long period faces down the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, on that massive day? This budget is going to set the tone for the next 5 years of Labour government. Surely your leader should be there, not the one who's leaving.
No, we should be clear. Rishi, of course, was Chancellor. He was also Prime Minister. He knows all aspects of the Treasury. It's a very difficult budget to respond to because we kind of know what's going to happen. So he can direct a laser-like focus on that budget and expose it for all it's worth. Then our Shadow Chancellor, obviously, Jeremy Hunt, will lead the debate the following day. Once again, having been Chancellor, he knows all the detail. That then allows us the following week, because remember the budget debate goes on, the first PMQs after the budget for our new leader to really zero in on the errors that Labour have made. And that, I think, gives us several bites at the cherry, and that's why I think it's the appropriate way to go forward.
Well, just a final question, but you're giving a chance here, aren't you, really, to Labour to blame the past on Sunak and Hunt rather than having a new person coming in?
We know that there's this myth of a £22 billion black hole. It is a myth. The Treasury refused to give full details on it. The reality is that we know that's not true. Jeremy, as the Shadow Chancellor now, has been itemising during this conference why that is a myth, why the actually public finances are in a far better state than Labour is saying, because they are preparing us for their tax rises and for the damage they're going to do to the economy. And then we, whoever is elected our leader, and I think you're right, any of our colleagues could be the new leader, and there could be an excellent leader, has to rebuild this party so we're ready for government. I predicted that in February 2025, we'd be printing the bumper stickers saying, don't blame me, I voted Conservative. I didn't think it was going to be less than 100 days before we were doing it.
We'll wait and see on that, Bob Blackman. Bob Blackman, the chairman of the 22 committee, in charge of the whole process. He's not budging. We won't have any leader in place until early November.
Chris O, once again, excellent work this week from Birmingham. Thank you very much, my friend, for joining us here on the show. And I'm joined in the studio back in Westminster by former Labour advisor, good pal of mine, Matthew Torbit. Matthew, welcome to the show. So from a Labour perspective, you've seen the performances of the four runners and the riders. Who would the Labour Party most fear as the next Conservative Party leader? And why?
Judging from the clips, I'd say Nigel Farage, actually. I think that's the one everybody needs to fear. But no, I think I've thought for some time and encouraged him when I saw him in Parliament to run. I think James Cleverly would be the one I would fear the most.
Why is that?
I think he looks the part, he sounds the part. I think I think I'm right in thinking he's got the most experience. He's got the military background. And I think, again, it puts Labour under a bit of pressure. I've thought for some time that Labour are going to struggle to keep calling themselves the progressive party out of both parties when he would be the first black leader of any main political party, and we're still electing straight white men. And I'm not, I think there's much more to diversity than colour or gender or anything like that. But I think it puts us in a tricky position, especially when Labour seems to be hemorrhaging votes from ethnic minorities.
In as far as there's this old chestnut, you win from the centre, but the party, certainly with Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch, seems to be tacking to the right now in terms of the membership. They favour those two candidates over James Cleverly or Tom Tugendhat, perhaps more centrist. There's a feeling amongst the membership the party does need to go to the right, and that's where those 4 million votes went to Reform. Is a more right-wing Conservative Party an asset or a problem for Labour?
I think potentially an asset, because I think from the clips just showed, Cleverly had the right diagnosis in that they weren't just losing votes from Reform. There are people, I think 1 in 9, that went to Labour. They also lost to the Lib Dems in many seats that are ordinarily Lib Dem Tory swing seats. So I think if you're fishing in the same pool as Nigel Farage, there's only a certain amount of voters that you can get from that pool. It's not a necessarily big one, and I think, you'd be better tested trying to win the country as opposed to a quite loud and annoyed part of the country at the moment.
In terms of tactical voting, Jacob Rees-Mogg was saying on this show yesterday, 98 seats where Reform came second to the Labour Party. The Tories should stand aside. Labour did that more or less off the record, didn't they, with the Liberal Democrats? There were a lot of seats where we all know how it works. Don't deploy assets here, where the Liberal Democrats are most likely to win. We'll have a paper candidate, but we won't have a formal, forward-facing public deal, but we all know there really is one. Is that the sort of thing you think that would scare the Labour Party? But more to the point, would the Tories ever do it? They seem to still think that the 4 million people who voted for Reform, well, they say it themselves, they're our people.
I don't think anybody's any people anymore. I think the general public are so sick and tired of all political parties over-promising, under-delivering, not feeling better off. I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world to have like an informal pact. I think if they're going to talk about maybe having a more formal thing, you're not giving people an excuse to vote the Conservatives. And I think the Conservatives could be seen as the redundant choice if you're going in many of these 98 seats. Well, Reform came second last time, so actually I might as well vote for them. Otherwise, I'm going to vote for the party that comes third. So I think that would be the likely the likely conclusion that we may see some form of coalition if Labour begin to hemorrhage support and this donor stuff and the other poor bits to the start becomes sort of terminal to Keir Starmer. And the economic turnaround doesn't happen, I think, you know, they're totally up for grabs.
Do you think at the moment we're in a strange position, Matthew, where Sir Keir Starmer and like your mob are probably thinking, phew, you know, thank crikey that it is the Tory party conference. In a sense, it's giving you guys a bit of a breather because it's got to be said, you're having a bit of a nightmare, aren't you? It's been a non-stop kind of war of negative headlines, scandal after scandal. What's next for the Labour Party?
A turnaround, I hope. I think it concerned me. I worry about how good these people are at politics, and I don't mean that as any sort of shade or sly dig. I think it would have made perfect sense to have a budget in the summer, straight out the traps. At the moment, there is a vacuum that needs to be filled. And because we've not filled it, the press will go on things like the donations and any other sundry story that they can find. I think if we'd have gone into Labour conference with loads of policies to talk about, lots of exciting things, a bit of a victory lap, we could have done. And I think this will only be a brief respite, because when Westminster returns next week, it'll all turn to the budget again. And Rich Reeves has got a month to go at keeping tight-lipped on what she's going to do. But there's got to be a bit of hope and a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And I think what the Tories could do, actually, just learning from Keir, which they probably won't want to do, but I think Keir, the one thing he did do right last week was he showed that little bit of ankle to potential Reform voters and Tory voters going, we're going to help our veterans. It's a real big issue for people that tend to lean towards the right and the centre-right, and it's going, no, there's a home for you as well here.
Except we asked him the next day, do veterans actually get priority over asylum seekers? And he said no. So you've got to be careful about flashing your ankle if it's not an actual kind of full-blown courtship. Matthew Torbett, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming in. Great company as ever. Now let's return now to Birmingham, where our political editor Chris Hope is waiting for us with fresh products. Chris, what's on your menu?
Martin, hello. I'm joined now by Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who is Tom Tugendhat's campaign manager. Anne-Marie, welcome. You were formerly, of course, International Development Secretary, I think, at the time, or Minister in the Foreign Office in charge of international development. Something's changed about you. You've got some inking on your neck.
What, you noticing my very, very attractive tattoo?
Yes, can you see that at home, Martin? Can you see
it's
that?
Very smart. It's an old-fashioned sailor's I love Tom tattoo.
It doesn't say mum on it, or
just Tom.
It just says Tom, and that's because you are the campaign manager for Tom.
Absolutely. I'm running Tom's campaign, which is a great pleasure.
I spent 4 hours with the candidates over the past 2 days. They're all good for different reasons. All of them could be leaders for different reasons. Tom is the one, he has authority from his military background. Is he a Tory? Is he a bit too Lib Dem for the base?
Oh, good Lord, he's so nowhere near the Lib Dems. What an interesting thought.
Look him in the eye, you think he's right-wing enough
so what he is, he's proper centre-ground conservative. He believes in freedoms, in a smaller state, in free trade, in the freedoms that make up conservative values. And what he wants to do, if he's given the opportunity both to bring, obviously, getting the Conservative Party back on her feet, that's a very practical, set of missions that needs doing, because we've had a bit of a bumpy ride and a bit of a kicking. Discuss whether that was fair or not, but the party needs to be brought back together. It's been really interesting to get a sense here at party conference. I was expecting to find people were still really frustrated, but they've sort of moved on. You know what, let's crack on, let's sort it out. And when we say the Conservative Party is sometimes a bit ruthless, perhaps this is a demonstration. Right, it was a disaster. You all got the kicking you needed, now get on to sort it out.
It's like there's a weight lifted off the party. Everyone, the activists seem quite jolly and up for the battle, maybe because of the difficult start Keir Starmer's had. But I put it to you that in a year's time, when fewer stands are here, these are all booked before the election, when fewer people are here, it might feel more like a morgue than an exciting children's birthday party.
Well, I think, Mr. Hope, that's a very depressing proposition, and I hope that whichever one of our 4 amazing candidates becomes leader, they will be bringing both energy, transformation for the party, but also taking that fight to Labour, because, as you say, Keir Starmer has had more than a bumpy ride. The first thing he did was something he didn't even mention he was going to do in his manifesto, which was attack the old people and take away their wage fuel allowance. This is the sort of vindictive, kind of class war politics that genuinely I didn't think Keir Starmer was going to demonstrate, and that is going to provide plenty of fuel for all those on the opposition benches, including a renewed Conservative Party.
Labour said they need to make in-year cuts, didn't they, to fill the £22 billion black hole left by your government?
Well, we can have a long discussion if you want on the merits or otherwise of the £22 billion hole. I think the point is that it's not going to probably save them any money, because what happens is all those who weren't on pension credits are now going to apply and take which is much more than £300 if you're on petrol code. It's up to £3,900.
Okay.
So very strange politics, and plenty of opportunity for the Tories to really have a go at.
Anne-Marie, just finally, in a tweet, why is Tom Tugendhat the man to be leader?
Tom's got the strength of personality, the leadership talent. He absolutely is all about service, and he's about delivery and action, and that for me is what we need.
OK, there we have it. Anne-Marie Trevelyan with a succinct distillation of an hour I spent with Tom Tugendhat yesterday in front of members here, Martin.
Superb stuff, Chris Hope. Excellent work. Once again, my friend, thank you very much for joining us live from Birmingham. Now, an astonishing new report reveals that 70,000 council houses are standing empty in Britain. That's despite 1.3 million people being on waiting lists. What on earth is going on? I'll discuss that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Michael Sheen talks about how he was wearing false teeth and wigs and whatever else to play this part. How's it gone down over that side of the pond?
I mean, I have to tell you, I absolutely loved it. I'm seeing everybody else there. They think it's a hoot, but Ben and Anne, it is very funny. And you walk away from it thinking that was great television. But is that appropriate when you think about the fact that it's associated with Jeffrey Epstein? You know, after it was over, I thought, I'm going to say good things about this. But the further I get away from it, the more I think, but what about these women that were violated by Jeffrey Epstein when they turned on the television? Were they laughing? Did they see the humor in it? Or are they horrified that it's become a joke?
The dialogue seemed very stilted and expositional, I thought. But then you think, well, that's clearly what they were trying to achieve. And it wasn't a documentary, it was a drama. And some bits were clearly made up.
Absolutely. I mean, when you watch the princesses crying, when you watch the princesses making decisions behind the scenes, it's very compelling television. And you have to remind yourself, similar to The Crown, that you are watching something based on a true story, but has been greatly exaggerated for entertainment value. And I initially thought, oh, this is horrible for Prince Andrew. And it is. It is. But at the same time, I think that sometimes these pieces make the royal family a little bit more relevant. They introduce people, they introduce new people, and people are now watching them a little more closely. And I think it's a double-edged sword. It can be both things. It can be bad. It can be good for the royal family.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:29. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, I can't believe this story. There are 1.3 million households on waiting lists for social housing in Britain. But an astonishing report today reveals that 70,000 council houses are simply standing empty. Well, for more on this, I'm now joined in the studio by Chris Bailey, the National Campaign Manager for Action on Empty Homes. Chris, thank you for joining us in the studio. How can it be the case that we have such monstrous waiting lists and yet we have 70,000 houses simply sat empty, rotting? Why can't we refit them and get them back on the market?
Really good question. I mean, I think some of these will be empty because actually they're being kept intentionally empty by the councils or the housing providers because they say they're going to refit them, but they maybe lack the money at the moment or lack the expertise. Some of them will be decanted. You know, there's about a third of the council homes that are empty are in London.
Yeah.
And a lot of London councils are actually knocking down big council estates and replacing them with new housing, which is quite controversial. And I suppose one of the issues with that is that it takes a long time to do it. They stay empty for a long time. It's a bit like when you're driving along the motorway and, you know, you're going at 50 miles an hour and you're doing it for 2 years and they're going to put a new lane in. But no one really takes account of all those delays. And I think housing's a bit like that. You know, we sometimes need to get stuff through the sausage machine a lot faster.
And when you look at where these black spots are, London 11,000, Southwark, where I live, the worst council in Britain, 1,500, and then the list, Birmingham, Sheffield, Leeds, Newham, Barking, Dagenham. These are places, Chris, with chronic housing shortages where we need housing. The solution is on a plate.
It's very true. I mean, it's part of the solution. I mean, I think the other side of this is that actually we have a lot of vacant houses in this country. We have over 1 million vacant houses. Most of them are privately owned. You know, we have twice as many homes that are a result of people having died that are just empty because people have died, don't pay any council tax and they're just sitting there empty. It's about 140,000 of those. That's double what there was less than a decade ago. And we haven't been suddenly killing off loads of old people, you know.
So why is there this obsession with new builds when we could just be making good and making do what we already have?
I think it's a really valid question. I mean, we're always going to need to build some new houses. And it's also a question of what you build and building for, you know, building for need, if you like. But this is the question people will ask. And this is one of the things I always say to councils that have high levels of empty homes. So, yeah, that actually you need to deal with that because each empty home on someone's street, and there are empty homes on most people's streets, it's like a signpost saying, you know, don't build here, because people tend to look at it and think, well, we need to deal with what's empty
first.
first.
Squats here.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, a lot of them cause big social problems, obviously. And I think part of the problem for councils is that actually with the private empties, they have to wait until they're causing a really big problem before they can kick most of the powers in, actually.
And it's got to be said, most of these seats, most of these areas are Labour councils. That's a separate point. Thank you very much for joining us today on the show. That's Chris Bailey, the National Campaign Manager for Action on Empty Homes. An astonishing story. Lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including more on the breaking news that multiple casualties have been reported now in Tel Aviv following a suspected terrorist attack. But first, here's your latest news headlines. It's Cameron Walker.
Good afternoon, it's 5:32. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. Iran is preparing to launch a ballistic missile attack against Israel imminently, according to the White House. It comes as tensions in the Middle East reach boiling point following the Israeli ground operation in southern Lebanon, the first since 2006. In the last half an hour, Israel's military claims to have killed Mohammed Jafar Qasir, a commander in charge of weapons transfers from Iran and its affiliates to the Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah. Meanwhile, the UK government has reiterated its call for Britons to escape Lebanon while they still can, chartering a commercial flight to help. Now, these are live pictures from the Israeli city of Tel Aviv, where police say a suspected terror shooting on the border with Jaffa has resulted in a number of casualties this afternoon. More news on that as we get it. In other news, Conservative leadership hopefuls Robert Jenrick and James Cleverly have hit out at Nigel Farage's Reform UK party. Mr Jenrick has suggested the party's popularity is down to Tory failure and broken promises, and James Cleverly ruled out a deal with Nigel Farage to win back voters. The candidates were speaking on stage at the Conservative Party conference this afternoon. A 14-year-old girl has been left with potentially life-changing injuries after a suspected acid attack outside a school in West London. A boy aged 16 and a 27-year-old woman were also injured after the substance believed to be acidic was thrown at the victims outside Westminster Academy yesterday afternoon. Police believe the teenagers were approached by a lone suspect who was on an e-scooter, with a member of the staff left injured after she rushed to help. The suspect has been described by police as tall, slim, black male, wearing dark clothing with his face obscured, possibly by a mask or a balaclava. Now, changes to the price cap on consumer energy bills take effect this month following the announcements by the regulator Ofgem. Bill payers have been urged to give an accurate meter reading as gas and electricity price rises take effect to avoid being charged on an estimated usage at the higher rate. A household in England, Wales and Scotland using a typical amount of gas and electricity will now see their annual bill rise by about £149 to £717 a year. New rules have come into force banning businesses from withholding tips or serving charges from their staff. 100% of tips must now be shared between restaurant, pub, hairdressers and taxi employees due to a new law that comes into effect today. Hospitality industry bosses, however, have warned the move could hit under-pressure businesses with an additional cost. And Buckingham Palace has announced Her Royal Highness Princess Beatrice and her husband, Edoardo Mopelli-Mozzi, are expecting their second child together. Due in the early spring, the new arrival will be a sibling for the couple's daughter Sienna and the princess's stepson Wolfie. The king has been informed and both families are delighted with the news. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's becoming drier from the west, but it's taking a time with still a lot of cloud across the UK and some showery rain. That rain, well, it's causing some issues across the east of England, and it will continue into the evening as the area of low pressure that's been with us for some days slowly pulls away. So some wet weather to come for East Anglia and the southeast overnight. Otherwise, the rain in the east tends to turn lighter and more showery as the night progresses, but we keep a lot of cloud for much of England and Wales. The clearest skies overnight will be for Scotland and Northern Ireland, 1 or 2 showers. Otherwise, under those clear skies, temperatures falling into the mid or even low single figures in some sheltered spots. Well, that's where we've got the brightest weather to start off Wednesday. Northern Ireland and Scotland, plenty of blue skies. Quite a difference from much of central, eastern and southern England, where there's a lot of low cloud, some mist and murk and some drizzle. Likewise for central and eastern Wales, but West Wales will see much brighter skies. Northern England turning brighter through the morning. Scotland and Northern Ireland, meanwhile, apart from 1 or 2 showers in the east, we'll see plenty of sunny skies. And we keep the sunshine across western Scotland and Northern Ireland throughout Wednesday. That's the place to be for widespread blue skies, and actually it's looking brighter for Northern England and North Wales. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover, and we've got these showers continuing to roll into East Anglia, the East Midlands and the southeast through the day. So that's going to make it feel a little less pleasant, and a brisk wind from the east as well will hold temperatures back in the mid-teens, but elsewhere feeling warm enough in any sunny spells. Then going into the evening, the clear skies in the north will progress southwards, and so a chilly start for many of us on Thursday, but actually plenty of fine weather through the day, sunny spells and feeling pleasant, but into the weekend, more rain to come.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long delays once again this afternoon heading north up the A1M through County Durham from junction 60 to 61, about a mile north of the Bradbury interchange. The emergency bridge repair works continue for a 5th day, not being helped by an earlier collision on that stretch. Really slow heading north up the M1 through West Yorkshire, junction 39 to 40 towards Wakefield after an earlier object was blocking the motorway. All lanes are back open. Still queuing in Gloucestershire on the M5 northbound 13 to 12 towards Gloucester following an earlier collision where a car drove into the central reservation. In southwest London, the A237, the London Road at Hackbridge, blocked by an accident. In southeast London, the Kidbrooke Park Road has been shut at Kidbrooke since this morning for accident investigation work. And on London Underground, the District Line is suspended from Earls Court to Wimbledon with severe delays from Edgware Road to Earls Court because of signalling problems at East Putney. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 5:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, breaking news now. Iran has launched missiles into Israel, and that's according to the Israeli military. As you can see, live pictures on your screen now of sirens there across the skyline of Tel Aviv. Moments ago, we heard these sirens in Jaffa, Tel Aviv. And for the latest on this breaking news story, I'm now joined by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, we've been speaking throughout the show as tensions continue to escalate. What's the latest?
This is the attack everyone had feared. Confirmation now from the IDF. I can read out the statement that they have just released as we continue to watch live shots of Tel Aviv this evening. A short while ago, they say, missiles were launched from Iran towards the state of Israel. You are instructed, it says, to remain alert and precisely follow home front command instructions. As you're still on me, I can probably show you. I have this system here that gives you an idea of rocket alert. I've never ever seen this clustered like this before. This is the whole of central Israel, rocket alerts galore over that area. You got live shots now. We'll continue to watch that with the Iron Dome missile defense system in operation, trying to take out these missiles that are landing. I'll continue to read that statement from the Israeli Defense Force saying, you are instructed to remain alert and precisely follow the Home Front Command's instructions. In the last few minutes, the Home Front Command has distributed life-saving instructions in various areas across the country. The public is asked to adhere to the Home Front Command's guidelines. Upon hearing a siren, you must enter protected spaces and remain there until further notice. Very dramatic images, as we can see on our screen now. The Iron Dome missile systems that are going up into the air, trying to intercept these missiles that are incoming, ballistic missiles, we understand, that are coming from Iran. And the worrying thing in the images that I'm seeing on the screen now, I've watched live in person in Tel Aviv, the Iron Dome going up. It would intercept these rockets that often come from Gaza. You see the Iron Dome going up, and then you see an explosion in the sky. We are seeing what looks like missiles going through the Iron Dome and heading down to the ground in the Tel Aviv area. We'll need confirmation, of course, from the Israeli government and the Israeli military that that is indeed what is happening. But it certainly looks like, from the images there, that you're not just seeing explosions in the sky, Martin, but we are also seeing missile streaks that look as though they're heading towards the ground. I noticed at least another one there, Martin, coming down, going behind that high-rise building in central Tel Aviv.
White, the pictures on screen there, as you say, you can see the Iron Dome missiles going up to attempt to intercept ballistic missiles that are inward coming. But of course, if that system is overloaded, Mark, if there are simply too many incendiary devices coming in, and we can see there now what appears to be fires have broken out on the ground across Tel Aviv. So clearly, Mark White, some of these missiles are getting through. They are making contact at ground level, sirens blaring out. And Mark White, for those who didn't see it, the image on your phone there, because of course you've been to Tel Aviv for GB News, you were there, you had that app on your phone to alert to incoming missile attacks, and you're saying it's just lighting up like a Christmas tree. It's non-stop.
Yeah, absolutely. As we look at another, clearly it looks to me like a missile that's going right down to the ground. I mean, the problem as such with the most incredible system that the Israelis have in the Iron Dome and related systems that are part of the aerial defense array is that there is only so many missiles that they can target and take out at any one time. You'll remember that back in April there was, for the very first time, an unprecedented attack launched by Iran because Israel, according to Iran, had taken out 2 Iranian generals in the capital of Syria, Damascus, at a strike on the Iranian embassy there. They launched this unprecedented attack, as I say, which was then 320 projectiles. Now that consisted of 30 30 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, 120 ballistic missiles, and 170 drones. Now, with the help of the US military and the UK military, they were able to shoot down the vast majority of those. We're told that 99% of those missiles, aerial threats, were taken out by the Israelis and their allies, the UK and the US. But if it's more than 320 this time, it's clear, I think, that that is overwhelming those defence systems, because they were right on the edge, I think, the last time back in April, of what they would be able to do in terms of being able to get all of those threats. As I say, a small number of missiles did get through, and it looks, from what I'm seeing, we'll need confirmation. I'm just getting more alerts from the IDF, as I say. We'll need confirmation from the Israeli government about what is coming through. IDF now saying sirens sounding all across Israel. This is a nationwide alert, not just the city of Tel Aviv, but all across Israel now, according to the IDF, sirens sounding. And what we're looking at there on our screens is images from what is being treated as a terrorist attack that we can only assume has been timed to coincide with this huge ballistic missile attack from Iran. This is on the outskirts of Tel Aviv in Jaffa. We're told that at least 10 people have been shot, some of those critically injured. No word that I can see on deaths as yet. You might have a better idea of that from where you are, Martin, but clearly a very significant incident that was unfolding on the outskirts of Tel Aviv anyway, with what we're told was 2 gunmen, and no indications yet that those gunmen have actually been captured or eliminated. So still at large, we think, and a number of casualties reported there. And in addition to that, now the attack sirens sounding right across Israel, with a very significant, it seems, launch coming from the Iranian regime.
Now, Mark White, earlier on today, a couple of hours ago, Washington, D.C. said there would be very severe consequences if Iran were to attack Israel. Mark White, it looks like that has happened. Can you give us an idea of the military capabilities of the respective countries in this area? A lot of people think that Iran can't possibly win a war with Israel in terms of how it's equipped, in terms of its personnel, its armaments, its arsenal, let alone if the USA decided to wade in to support Israel. In terms of this developing into something bigger, into all-out war, what might that look like, Mark White?
Well, it doesn't bear thinking about, to be honest, if it was an all-out war between Iran and between Israel. The hope is, as much as it's a hope, because it's horrible to contemplate in itself, is that we get a launch that we're clearly seeing now from Iran. Israel responds in some degree to that, and then that's it. They call it quits, as they did back in April. But if this is, as it seems, a very significant launch that's hitting multiple areas of Israel, then all bets are off, really, in terms of how Israel decides to respond to that. And of course, if we are also seeing attacks from Hezbollah in the north, because they have been crippled, they have been badly wounded by the attacks from Israel in the last couple of weeks, but they still have a very significant capability there. And if Israel is being attacked on multiple fronts tonight, then we are in a very, very dangerous place.
And Mark White, we had the Foreign Secretary David Lammy earlier on saying we want a ceasefire, we want a de-escalation, we believe in a political solution. Mark White, that looks increasingly forlorn and perhaps naive, because the writing has been on the table for a long, long time. The Islamic Republic of Iran have been very outspoken in their objective. They seem to want to destroy Israel and all it stands for.
Yes, absolutely. And we are expecting, actually, a statement, according to Iranian state TV, from the Revolutionary Guards to be published soon. But as we await that, the Israeli media, Martin, is reporting that 100 missiles have been launched from Iran towards Israel, fired towards Israel. Also, Iranian missiles have, we're told, been intercepted in Jordanian airspace as they flew over Jordanian airspace towards Jerusalem. That, according to the Reuters news agency. And more, as we're looking into the night sky there, are these live shots that we are looking at the moment of Tel Aviv? Or is that the earlier alerts that were
these are live shots.
You're looking now at live shots of Tel Aviv with the sirens sounding once again. I'm going to pause and let you listen to that.
So, Mark White, that is the ballistic missiles coming in to the area, and we will shortly see, no doubt, the Iron Dome go over. Of course, that's a complex system of intercepting missiles, trying to stop any of these missiles landing. But as you said, Mark White, there is a bandwidth of what they can handle, and if that gets overloaded, then these missiles start landing. And we seem to be going through a second barrage, Mark White. We saw first barrage about 5 minutes ago. Seems to be a fresh barrage now incoming, Mark.
Yes, we can see those aerial array defence systems in operation now up there. This is very much the kind of imagery that I witnessed a year ago in Israel, with multiple rockets streaking up into the sky looking for targets, and they explode near these targets. You can see the Iron Dome exploding there, but at least 2-3 projectiles that I can see heading down right towards central Tel Aviv with impacts on the ground in the distance. There are more explosions in the night sky over Tel Aviv from these missile systems. As I say, they're very, very clever, very sophisticated. They know what to track. They track them, they detonate near projectiles, sending out thousands of pieces of shrapnel to explode and to take those missiles out of the air. And they are effective the vast majority of the time, but on occasions, of course, missiles get through. And just the imagery we're looking at, no confirmation from the Israeli government that I've seen so far as yet, but it certainly looks as though it's either missiles coming down or the leftover spent remains of Iron Dome missiles coming back down to earth, because we can't understate the fact that, you know, as great as they are for the Israeli people to protect the population, they can also come down and cause collateral damage on the ground as well. I've got an update for you, Martin, with regard to the terrorist attack on the outskirts of Tel Aviv, the city we're looking at the screen on the moment. The Israeli government now confirming that 4 people have been killed and 7 wounded in this shooting attack in the Tel Aviv suburb of Jaffa. 2 shooters, we're told now, according to the Israeli government, in their description, have been neutralised, so have been taken out, killed, we assume. We also, Martin, have had a statement from the US President Joe Biden saying on Tuesday, we discussed how the United States is prepared to help Israel defend against these attacks and protect American personnel in the region. He said that he was clearly, as Israel's key ally, prepared to put US forces in harm's way to try to intercept these missiles before they can come in, before they can do any real damage to Israel. We are yet to hear from the UK government as to whether any of the military that we have in that region have assisted in any way. What happened back in April when Iran launched missiles, drones towards Israel is that we had UK fighter jets, Typhoon fighter jets, that were up over Iraq at the time as part of Operation Shader. This is the ongoing operation that is now beginning to wind down, but the operation to go after the Islamic State in Iraq, and then they were retasked to intercept these Iranian missiles as they came over towards Israel. So we don't know, of course, those Typhoons are normally based at RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus. They could be on station over that region pretty quickly if required, Martin.
And Israeli officials are saying they expected the target to be 3 military air bases, but this is Tel Aviv. This is the city. This is a residential area. We're seeing regular barrages, Mark, of a substantial amount of incoming missiles, and then those iron domes going up. We are seeing and hearing evidence of explosions on the ground. So clearly, Mark, it seems that some of these missiles are getting through. That, of course, is the technique, isn't it? To try and overload the Iron Dome so not everything can be intercepted. And if they're intercepted close to ground, as you said, Mark, then the explosions overhead themselves can cause significant damage with the shrapnel and the explosion raining down on very heavily populated areas.
Yes, and as I say, we still await word from the Israeli government as to whether any of those Iranian missiles have got through, whether it is the collateral fallout from the Iron Dome and other related missile systems coming down after either finding a target or not finding a target. But I'm just hearing from a source that British RAF Typhoons and a tanker aircraft are in the air currently over Turkey in the region. We don't know if they have been tasked to help out to intercept any of these incoming projectiles as yet. Again, that will have to be confirmed in the fullness of time by the British government, but a significant piece of information, I think, to bring you that a security source confirming to me that RAF Typhoons and a refuelling tanker are currently up and over Turkish airspace.
Okay, thank you on that point, Mark White. I'm now joined by the former NATO commander, Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Chris, welcome to the show. In concerning circumstances, we're seeing intermittent barrages of what would appear to be ballistic missiles coming into the sky over Tel Aviv. We're seeing the Iron Dome go up in response. Rear Admiral Chris Parry, it seems very much like the Middle East is on the brink here.
No, I don't think it is. I think what you're seeing here is a situation where Iran is quite desperate, it's weak, it can't support its allies in its so-called axis of resistance. Hamas are being hammered, Hezbollah is being attacked, the Houthis are being attacked, and the Israelis are fighting on 7 fronts, and there's nothing Iran can do about it. So I'm afraid to say this is another performative attack like that back in April. And unless there's a considerable amount of damage done on the ground or significant targets are hit, don't expect it to escalate beyond here.
And so in this instance, they have to be seen to do something, of course, is what you're saying, because, of course, the head of Hezbollah was taken out in dramatic fashion. We saw the Grim Bleeper attacks taking out huge parts of Hezbollah's network. And so there has to be some kind of response, you're saying. This is a performative show of force.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got to remember these are not just terrorist organisations, they're criminal organisations as well. And normally you can only operate a criminal organisation like this if you've got top cover. And that top cover has been decidedly lacking recently, and it's got very personal. With Nasrallah killed, the pager attack, all these things, it's got very personal, and Iran hasn't been able to do anything to protect its proxies and its agents in the region. For a power like Iran, that is really embarrassing, and this is their response. They're trying to say, look, we're trying to help you, but frankly, they don't want a war with Israel right now. Israel doesn't want a war with Iran, and I suspect it'll just be performative, as I said.
And Chris Parry, in terms of potential next steps, Washington has already said there'll be severe consequences if Iran attacks Israel. It looks like that's happened. But presumably in terms of military capability, the Iranians have no way of taking on Israel, let alone if the United States decide to join in.
Oh, I mean, the last thing the Iranians want, the last thing the Chinese and the Russians want is for the Americans to take on Iran right now. And neither do we, because oil prices will go through the roof. But the fact of life is it's in nobody's interest for this to escalate further. And I would say if the Americans have to step in, it'll be all over for the Iranian regime in Iran as well, because their people won't put up with it.
Hello, and Chris Parry, how relevant and noteworthy is it? We just heard that news there from Mark White. It says RAF Typhoons have been deployed.
Well, yeah, we're doing our bit. I'm not sure why they're flying over Turkey at the moment in relation to this attack, but I'm sure they know what they're doing. It's good that we are helping to defend a free country, keep itself safe.
And presumably, Rear Admiral Chris Parry, now the evacuation of Lebanon, which is already underway. David Lammy said earlier the time to leave is now. This will only heighten that situation.
I would think so. My own sense, though, is that the Israelis have limited objectives in Lebanon. The real issue comes from the fact that in 2006, after the last conflict with Hezbollah, Hezbollah agreed that it would withdraw north of the Litani River, which is well to the north of the border with Israel. They didn't do so. My sense is the Israelis are going to neutralise that area up to the Litani River, and then I think they'll think their war aims have been achieved.
And in terms of a wider war in the area, Rear Admiral Chris Parry, the Islamic Republic of Iran have made no secrets. In fact, they've given plenty, ample warning of the fact they want to annihilate Israel, wipe it out. They despise all it stands for. Might Israel welcome the opportunity to be able to deal with them once and for all?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you might as well deal with Iran and its axis of resistance while Iran is weak. Let's not forget that Israel does have its ultimate deterrent if things get really nasty. They're not going to use it unless they really have to, if its existence is threatened, I would suggest. But Iranian calculations always have to take that into account.
Okay, thank you, Rear Admiral Chris Parry, for your input. I'm now going to hand over to Michelle Dewberry. Of course, Jubes & Co. is up next. I'll be back tomorrow 3 till 6. Here's Michelle Dewberry taking over.
Thank you very much for that, Martin Daubney. It is 6 o'clock. I am Michelle Dewberry, and this is Jubes & Co. We open the show tonight with the news that there has been a significant escalation now as Iran has apparently launched missiles into Israel. Let me cross live to our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White. Good evening to you. Please bring our viewers and listeners up to speed with the very latest.